Oh, we're live? Welcome to Technology Brothers, the most profitable podcast in the world. Today, we're doing a deep dive on Deepseek, the new AI model coming out of China. They say they trained it for just $500, less than this cash stack, but we'll dig into that because it's a hot topic. A lot of people are debating about this. But we wanted to take you back to May of last year when Deepseek actually launched. It's in the news because they launched a new model, but the company's been out there open sourcing LLMs for something like 6 months now, and it's shaking up the timeline. The timeline's in turmoil over there.
Timeline's in turmoil.
Yeah.
And I'll go out on a limb to say this is China's next attempt at a DJI TikTok type product where, hey, let's basically sell this product in America for way less than it costs. Give it away for free. Try to get a bunch of important, companies using it or consumers dependent on it. And then, it's a little bit of, spyware.
Yeah,
everywhere.
Extract the data. There's all the same geopolitical considerations that we walk through.
And there's the incentive, for them, if it is, you can basically assume that any important Chinese company is, backed by the state to some degree. Even if they're not, they're sort of, got a gun to their head the entire time they're operating it.
Implicitly.
So we're excited to get into this one. As our mission at Technology Brothers is to, entertain, cover some news, and take down CCP fronts. So
exactly.
Let's get into it.
So let's kick it off with a fantastic analysis by Dylan Patel in Semi-Analysis. This is from May 7th of 2024. And it's interesting.
And Dylan is, for those that don't know, he's the Tom Brady of semiconductor analysis.
Right? 100%.
He's the kind of guy that gets invited on BG Squared to
he's been on
teach the old dogs, how the semis are barking these days.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's a fantastic. It's essentially a Substack subscription model, $500 a year. But then he also does a ton of consulting. And what's interesting is that he doesn't just read the 10Ks or anything. Like, he will task satellites to figure out where they're building stuff and really collect data. And then he sells
doing the same thing that hedge funds doing.
Yeah,
it's more.
Yeah. So I think Semi-Analysis is actually a pretty large company now with a number of analysts, and he's not going the kind of solo creator route. He's very much focused on building a research organization, but he's also just hilarious on podcasts, very free flowing, just says whatever he wants, totally uses very online lingo too in these very professional settings, which is great. I'm a big fan.
Love to see it.
So this is the title of this is OpenAI is doomed to make Microsoft, and it's kind of walking through a bull and bear case for OpenAI, given all of the different dynamics and different cluster build outs that were happening mid last year. And it starts by saying, all eyes are on how long the profitless spending on AI continues. H100 rental pricing is falling every month. This was a big trend last year. In 2023, ChatGPT was blowing up, and everyone was like, I will do anything if someone can get me a rack of A100s. A lot of VC funds are spinning up the Andromeda. But in 2024, rental pricing went down as fewer firms realized that, hey, maybe they don't want to be in the pre-training game. They just want to fine tune, or they just want to build. They want to be rappers, essentially. And then also the really, really big firms might just be building super clusters that didn't even affect the rental pricing market. And so availability is growing quickly for medium-sized clusters at fair pricing. Despite this, it's clear that demand dynamics are still strong. While the big tech firms are still the largest buyers, there is an increasingly diverse roster of buyers around the world, still increasing GPU purchasing sequentially. Most of the exuberance isn't due to any sort of revenue growth, but rather due to the rush to build ever larger models based on dreams about future business. The clear target that most have in mind is matching OpenAI and even surpassing them. Today, many firms are within spitting distance of OpenAI's latest GPT-4 in chatbot ELO, and in some ways such as context length and video modalities, some firms are already ahead. So context length, that's the Google thing. Where
drop an entire book
in Gemini and
drop the entire banger archive.
Exactly. And so There's been a bunch of ways to differentiate. Even if you just get close to GPT-4, you do a similar run, and then you build a different tool around it, or you fine tune it, or you build different unhobbling. So this one uses the web. This one it can process PDFs. This one can.
You don't really hear about Mistral much anymore.
No, I haven't heard
was that because the French don't have a word for entrepreneur?
I like that. Oh yeah, it's the
Ryan Peterson. It's great. They were trying to community note him on that, but I don't think they got it through.
That's great. It's probably a war. So Gemini 2 Ultra is rumored to surpass GPT-4 Turbo in every way. Furthermore, Meta's Llama 3 405B is also going to match GPT-4 while being open source, meaning GPT-4 class intelligence will be available to anyone who can rent an H100 server. But he goes on to mention the Phoenix from the East. It's not just the big tech firms that have rapidly caught up. Yesterday...
Real quick, one kind of interesting comparison is it feels like... the models have fast approached being almost like the sports car market, where it's like Porsche can be like, well, we have better handling, and McLaren can be like, well, we're faster in a straight line.
Yeah, exactly.
And Tesla's like, well, I'm fastest in the straight line.
Yep.
You know, so they're all just sort of competing, doing a lot of things pretty well.
Yep.
And then competing on these edge cases that almost the average, and the reason that ChatGPT has stayed very dominant from a user standpoint is because they have the consumer mind share. The average person is not like prompt engineering. They don't care about the context window. They're just almost using it like a Google that can do things on your behalf.
Yeah, I mean, and this was one of the big like bear cases for these LLM companies after ChatGPT dropped was like, well, is everyone just going to train these and it's going to be completely commoditized? But then the companies kind of figured out, well, if Grok is a little bit less PC, that's an edge, and if Gemini has a bigger context window. But there's some fascinating stuff in here about how the different big tech companies are able to integrate their models and actually bootstrap to much larger user bases, which results in getting more data from users, which is very interesting. But he highlights Deepseek, which launched in May of 2024. It says China's Deepseek open sourced a new model that is both cheaper to run than Meta's Llama 3 70B and better. So this was not as big of news because it wasn't truly better than GPT-4. So it kind of slid under the radar, but it was cheap on inference, meaning you just needed less compute to actually run it.
And this is, to be clear, the same thing that China has done historically with DJI, where DJI is selling products without any profit margin at all. Potentially even losing money on a unit basis because they just want to get the product out into the world, getting used, getting consumed. And so, and not too dissimilar in my view to TikTok faking views, right? Because they're like, well, if users come on here, they post something, they get 1,000 views. They're not going to want to go on Instagram and post the same content and get 200 views, right? That's sort of
and I mean, the Chinese censorship is already a thing. It says, while the model is more tuned for Chinese language queries, because that's the tokenizer in the training data set, and government censorship of certain ideas, it does happen to win in the universal languages of code,
and
eval and math.
Don't ask DeepSeek about the Uyghurs. Your laptop will explode. They're not.
And so
about that.
DeepSeek claims that a single node of 8x H800 GPUs can achieve more than 50,000 decode tokens per second peak throughput. At the quoted API pricing of output tokens alone, that is $50 of revenue per node per hour. The cost for an 8x H800 node in China is about $15 an hour. So assuming perfect utilization, DeepSeek can make as much as $35 an hour per server, or up to 70% gross margins. This is what we were talking about yesterday. With as you make these models more inference optimal, you get higher margins, and that's a lot of what DeepSeek has been kind of lauded for. And it even says, even more interesting is the novel architecture DeepSeek has brought to market. They did not just copy what Western firms did. There's a lot of stuff that they did copy, and there's a lot of data that they probably stole, and there's a lot of weird political things where they maybe broke rules and laws, but they did create some fundamental innovations technically on the algorithm side. And I think that this whole story is going to be complex because people are going to want to take one side or the other. and just say, oh, it's a complete copycat. They're lying about everything. There's nothing interesting here. Or it's amazing. It's the biggest breakthrough. And they need to boil it down to a single tweet. And that's why I'm glad we have an hour to talk about this.
It's such an interesting thing where they're coming out with an open source product that they are undercutting the entire market on. But it's hard to say, oh, they're simultaneously putting everything out there while there's clearly stuff happening behind the scenes that we don't really know about.
Yeah.
Right?
And so we'll get into a little bit of the background, but they do seem pretty cracked. There are brand new innovations in mixture of experts, ROPE, and attention. Their model has more than 160 experts with 6 riding. Oh, no. The phone fell. Too much Chinese.
Oh, it's too many notifications.
Yeah. Well, back to the show. Furthermore, Deepseek implemented a novel multi-head latent attention mechanism, which they claim has better scaling than other forms of attention while also being more accurate. They trained on 8.1 trillion tokens. Deepseek V2 was able to achieve incredible training efficiency with better model performance than other models at 1/5 the compute of Meta's Llama 3 70B. And so, for those keeping track, DeepSeek V2 training required 1/20th as much energy, essentially, 1/20th the flops of GPT-4, while not being far off in performance. And so then he goes on to talk about, is Microsoft committed to OpenAI? There's a big discussion there. That's kind of old news.
And the new news there is that Satya is, subtweeting Sam in Elon's comments. So that shows a little bit of, maybe the marriage isn't perfect under the hood.
And this is something that he does bring up throughout the piece and throughout a lot of these analyses, which we talked about. He really was early to this idea of Satya saying, I'm good for my 80 billion. And what does that really mean? Well, it's Azure workloads. And this is something that happens a lot where Zuck will say, oh yeah, I just bought 200,000 NVIDIA GPUs. And then we dig into it and you're like, oh, well, like half of that is going to recommendation algorithms for Reels. And that's great. Like it's cool. They have the infrastructure, but it's not all LLM, AGI, race training, which is what people are really focused on. So I'm moving on to page 7. Is distribution and integration king? With DeepSeek and Llama 3 405B coming to the open source, there's very little reason.
Did you want to cover Microsoft trying to reduce their
I think we kind of covered that in the sense that like the closer here is that many firms use OpenAI's technology through Azure. More than 65% of Fortune 500 now use Azure OpenAI service. It's noteworthy that this is not directly through OpenAI. OpenAI can lose significant business without Google, DeepMind, or Amazon Anthropic gaining share simply by Microsoft pushing their own model instead. And so he was just kind of commenting in this piece about the temperature in the room with regard to the Microsoft and OpenAI deal at the time. But that story has evolved so much, and we've covered it so much, I don't think we need to dig into that. I'd rather focus on this distribution and integration is king section. With DeepSeek and Llama coming to the open source, there's very little reason for enterprises not to host their own model. Zuckerberg's strategy of using open source models to slow down competition, the competition's commercial adoption, and attract more talent is working wonders. So everyone's like, why is he open sourcing this thing? Like, this is very expensive. And it was all about getting people to come work at Meta on this cool project, and then also curb more companies from doing build outs, because they're like, what's the point? And this is probably the pressure that we felt on Aiden Gomez Cohere, right? And maybe even Mistral, where it's like, well, if your whole thing is like the open source, or like you're like not the true frontier compounder winner, well, you're just never going to be able to make any money, because the open source one's going to come out. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit behind GPT-5 or GPT-4, but if Zuck keeps open sourcing it, you're just never going to make any money. And so it's going to be really hard. So he's keeping the pressure on. And then also because of Databricks, which we've talked about before, Databricks lets you fine tune really easily. And so it's no longer like fine tuning is no longer a monumental task. And so one of OpenAI's advantages is that they have been ahead in collecting data, specifically usage data. And that happens when you sometimes when you issue a query to GPT-4 or ChatGPT, it'll say, hey, we actually give you 2. Which one do you like more? And then you can A/B, or every post will have a thumbs up, thumbs down. And then also they'll be able to just see, okay, did you follow up with another query? So they're collecting lots of data, and they have 100 million users. But he says only a quarter of Americans have ever even tried ChatGPT, and most don't continue to use it. Most future consumer LLM usage will go through existing platforms: Google, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, iPhone, Android. While Meta hasn't found out how to monetize it, their Meta AI, powered by Llama 3 70B, is available across Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram. The announced rollout has been extended to 14 countries, including the US. So they've hit 1.1 billion in population, but they have 3.2 billion daily active users. And so they're scaling up. And when they do, they get all that data from, and then they can use that to fine tune the next version of the model.
Mark, imagine being Mark and you're already halfway through your TAM.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get these incremental users that just don't have internet. They're like,
well, they were focused on that for a while. They were like, we are going to bring satellite to Africa.
Yeah. It is interesting.
Facebook.
Meta could have probably almost launched a Starlink competitor with how much they spend on the metaverse.
Oh, yeah.
And then actually deliver the metaverse, and the real metaverse is just Reels.
They had a project for that, Project Loon at Google, which was internet via balloon. Via blimp, essentially.
That's cool.
And I believe in India, there's a free Facebook like phone plan that you can get the internet, and you only get Facebook. So you kind of have to do everything or something like that.
Yeah.
You basically have to do everything through Facebook, but
cool.
but it does bring more users online. And so all of that is feeding both fine-tuning data on the LLM, and then also just user data and preference data that goes into the system overall.
They're saying if Apple was more creative, would they not have just sent up their own satellite network and just said, you now are going to get all your
data from us, and you don't need Verizon anymore?
Yeah.
That would have been cool. Probably more reliable. And so Meta's deployment probably hurts Google search more than Bing or Perplexity ever will, because people will just wind up searching in Facebook and Instagram. To serve 3 billion people, you clearly need to have a small and efficient model to bring the cost of inference down, especially when you're not making money on it. You're not charging $20 a month or $200 a month. Either Meta has made the financial math work, or it is prepared to invest heavily to execute a land grab in the consumer AI space. Either spells disaster for incumbents.
Yeah, and that's the difference between Apple and Meta, where Meta is still in founder mode.
Yep.
Apple, Google are in manager mode.
Yep.
And they're willing to invest. Google obviously has to show their investors and the markets that they're investing and serious about winning the AI race.
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually look that ambitious in practice.
Well, speaking of ambition at potentially non-founder mode companies, the other argument to be made is if compute and capital are king, in that case, Google is king, given their hyper-aggressive TPU build-out pace. So Google has created their own chip to rival the GPU, called the TPU, the tensor processing unit. It's fabbed at TSMC, I believe. And so, but it's designed specifically just for AI workloads. So you can't even run video games on it. Essentially, it's just for this.
Yeah.
Much like the advanced
no 360 no scope.
Yeah. Much like the advanced NVIDIA stuff. But Google is investing super heavily and definitely takes seriously the capex. And so, ironically, Google now has focus and is directing all large-scale training efforts into one combined Google DeepMind team, while Microsoft is starting to lose focus by directing resources to their own internal models that compete with OpenAI. And so Google, DeepMind used to be a separate company. It was acquired, Demis Hassabis and that team, and they were working kind of separately. It was Google Brain and DeepMind, and they brought them all together because they were like, the capex is so intense, you guys have to work on one big model instead of two smaller ones. And so this is one of the biggest risks for OpenAI, is that the capital game is all that matters. If that's the case, the tech company that invests the most is the winner. And this is why we're seeing Project Stargate, which we'll talk about later. But if capital does matter, OpenAI needs to be in a place where they can have access to the absolute largest cluster.
Yeah, which is why it's amazing that OpenAI has been able to do what they've done, because Sam Altman, I promise you, does not care about some other startup that raised $30 million.
No.
He cares about these players that can invest $30 billion off their own balance sheet to compete with him and have distribution. So it's not, it's like the most harrowing task, to be honest, where you take one of the best fundraisers ever in the world, Sam Altman, but you give him this impossible task of saying, go compete with people who have balance sheets that dwarf your total capital raised.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it really is insane. I mean, everyone's obviously still buying a ton of NVIDIA, but Microsoft has the least custom AI silicon deployed to their cloud, but they're working on it. Google has the TPU, which is obviously the biggest, but Meta and Amazon are also ramping internal silicon. And even Apple has Apple silicon, which is only for the phones and the laptops now, but clearly they have internal capabilities to develop custom silicon. Yep. And so you could see them developing their own hardware as well. OpenAI trained GPT-4 in 2022. Since then, they have been entirely focused on the next step up, experimenting with new architecture, data, etc. OpenAI has a tremendous first mover advantage, and they have been solidly targeting models an order of magnitude larger than everyone else for a while now.
So they have the first mover advantage, but every time they ship something new, people dissect it and try to implement many of those learnings.
For sure. But they seem to just be like, a little bit farther on the treadmill. Like just
they're constantly ahead, but then they're, by nature of the product, they have to expose some amount of
totally
how it actually
works, I mean, some
right?
of these it's just like if there's a good idea like voice or upload a PDF, it's like, okay, that's like a
features are easy, but also how the machine works, right?
Yeah, totally. They try and hide that, but if there's just a few secrets, it's like one East Bay rationalist party where everyone's talking and all the same,
No, it's so hard because
EA meeting.
People in startups like to yap, right? There's I'm sure they all have like really intense, NDAs and things like that, but it's not like it's a government, even stuff leaks out of the government, right?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
It's not as secure as that.
And so he kind of closes with the midwit meme of on the left.
Right?
This
is why he's goated.
Yeah.
Selling these memes to hedge funds for probably like $1 million a year subscription.
So as far as the capital game is concerned, Sam Altman is flying around the world, winning the favor of many of the richest people in the world for a reason. They will raise more money than anyone else is even imagining to spend on a single model after they showed the world what they've been cooking the last 2 years. The real risk for big tech companies is that they do not show any meaningful gains in revenue, but they have to keep accelerating their spending to keep up with OpenAI or maintain market share in their monopoly, Google Search. This would cause data center CapEx party to keep going and consequently their margins to compress. So it's interesting because there's almost like this expectation that it's like, of course, OpenAI loses money. Like they just became like a real for profit. It's a startup. Sam's at the helm. He's dealing with Masa. It's this crazy thing. They're going for AGI. Yeah. If you're Google, it's like, you're a shareholder, you're like, wait, why are your margins compressing? Like, is this really that real? Like, why don't you just partner with them? Like, is this important?
Well, it's hard because Google needs to show that they're competitive with OpenAI. But at the same time, if their a lot of people have been short Google because they're saying, okay, well, these models are a threat to search. And so if your margins are compressing because you're spending more while people are starting to use competitive products for search, it's really hard for Sundar to go up at a quarterly and be like, we're not really worried about this model stuff. Like, he kind of has to put on a brave face for markets, but that behind the scenes, he's worried about his job. Probably the number one candidate would be one of the founders. But
and it's this weird bargain that actually kind of drives bubble behavior, where if you underinvest and AI is real, you're screwed. If you overinvest and AI is real, you're great. If you overinvest and AI isn't real, you still have a lot of assets. It's still valuable. Like there was a lot of dark fiber that wound up getting used later on. So the risk reward calculation is like super weighted to overinvestment right now. So let's move on to I don't know if it was an interview or just some coverage of China's new face of AI, Deepseek founder Liang Wenfang. Wenfang. This guy is he's the next Frank Wang.
Frank Wang,
the founder of DJI. We're learning. I mean, very similar stories. We'll dig into this, but this is from the.
By the way, he looks incredibly good for 40. He looks like he's like 22.
He does look 22. He's 40. Whoa. Okay. Yeah.
Which again, we don't know if anything they say is real.
He might be 20.
So he might be like Bill Menitis.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
He'd be like Bill Menitis.
Yeah. A little age gambit going on.
Yeah.
A lot of people in Hollywood doing that. Changing the ages. So DeepSeek is in the news again because they launched R1, which is their reasoning model that competes with O1. And there's a post explaining explaining who this guy is and where DeepSeek came from that we're going to read through now. So the founder of artificial intelligence firm DeepSeek, touted as 2025's biggest dark horse in the open source large language model arena, emerged as the industry's new face in China at a symposium hosted by the premier in Beijing on Monday. Liang Wenfang, 40, took part in the meeting where a select group of industry experts in the fields of technology, education, science, etc., offered their opinions and suggestions, according to the news agency. And so last December, they made waves in the global AI industry after benchmark tests showed that its DeepSeek version 3 LLM, which again is not the reasoning model, this is more just like a GPT-4 competitor, which was built on a shoestring budget, which we'll discuss if that's real or not.
And I have to put that in the truth zone.
Yeah. Outperformed rival models developed with more resources by the likes of Meta Platforms and ChatGPT creator OpenAI. Lee called on the economy's new growth drivers.
Because we don't have images pulled up, he is wearing a suit here,
looks
which
great.
We love to see.
We love to see it.
We got to give him some credit. He looks very young for his age. He's wearing a suit. So we're gonna really put him in the truth zone hard in a bit. But
and so recently, Beijing made AI a national priority amid a heightened tech war between the United States and China, the world's two largest economies. China's AI market is expected to be worth $765 billion by 2030, according to state-backed investment vehicle China International Capital Corp. In the age of AI geopolitics, tech companies inevitably would have tighter connections with governments than before, says Winston Ma, a New York University law professor. And so apart from being a regulator, governments could be a sovereign investor or a cross-border deal mediator. And we're already seeing that with the CHIPS Act. And so investment is going to be massive, something like over $1 trillion invested over the next 6 years in China's AI industry. And that's funny that they're saying that they're going to invest 1.4 trillion, because that's 3 times what Project Stargate is. So, maybe this is
Stargate, to be clear, they market it as a infrastructure product for one company.
Yeah.
It was very nicely positioned as, this is for America.
Yeah.
It was pretty brilliant on OpenAI's behalf. But no, we don't have a lot of details. But and we should try to go through the girly piece, because he gave a thread of, here's all the questions I have about OpenAI's Project Stargate. But if this is 1.4 trillion total is what they're saying over 6 years, if Masa and Sam managed to do 500, which not very many people actually believe, that that's just one company. So presumably you have OpenAI, you have Microsoft and Google and a ton of other big players, not to mention early stage investing. So I imagine we can and should dwarf that number just to make a statement.
Completely disagree. We got to size it up. If they're doing 1.4 trillion, we got to do 10 times.
That's what I'm saying. We should dwarf their 1.4.
Oh yeah, good, perfect. Okay, great.
It would be un-American to not do.
I was about to grab you by the collar and start just wailing on you if you start talking like that.
Yeah, that'd be very un-American.
So hailing, let's go into the background of the founder. This actually went viral just as a screenshot because it's so interesting. So this is about the founder of DeepSeek. Hailing from southern Guangdong province, Liang went to study electronics, information, and computer vision, a field of AI that trains computers to capture and interpret information from images and video data, at Zhejiang University in Hangzhou. Along with a group of university classmates, he started exploring how AI can be used to automate stock investments. Then he becomes one of the co-founders of a great named firm called Highflyer Quant.
That's my quant.
Which uses AI to manage one of the largest quantitative hedge funds in mainland China. So this is the stuff that you're seeing at Jane Street and Citadel now, and maybe Jump Trading too. And a lot of those firms have moved to AI-driven investment strategies, but also they because they're doing high frequency trading, they operate at a very low level. So a lot of them, Jane Street writes everything in OCaml, which is like a programming language, it's like machine language. It's almost like it's like Python is like 3 levels of abstraction away from them, so they can very fine tune the speed at which these algorithms run, and everything can be proven like mathematically. So these are just like some of the best programmers in the world. And Highflyer Quant grew its asset under management more than tenfold over a 4-year span, from 1 billion won in 2016 to more than 10 billion in 2019, according to local media reports and information from the company's website. And so it seems like they've really been on a run. Over the years, Highflyer Quant spent a large portion of profits on AI to build a leading AI infrastructure and conduct large-scale research, the company said in a statement in April of 2023. Months later, Highflyer Quant spun off Deepseek, which launched a series of AI models used by developers to build third-party applications by the startup to create its own chatbot. Highflyer Quant managed to buy more than 10,000 NVIDIA graphics processing units before the U.S. government imposed the chip bans, according to a local media outlet. On its website, the hedge fund manager said it spent 200 million yuan and 1 billion yuan in 2020 and 2021, respectively, to build its Fireflyer series of AI computing clusters. Then a senior research scientist wrote that DeepSeek has emerged as this year's biggest dark horse. And so they've been investing a ton, and everyone is talking about how cracked their team is.
And yeah, they very much are trying to spread the narrative that this company just randomly popped up, spent $5 million and had a model that was competitive with OpenAI. And it can't be overstated how much that is not the truth, right? This is a team that had been building.
And we'll get into this, but there's a theory that they got a call from the U.S. government or from the Chinese government and basically said, like, look, we understand that you're making tons of money as a quant fund, but you have the best engineers. Like, it is your duty to step up and build AGI
and go
for
compete
us.
with
and
OpenAI.
Go compete and you have to do this. Let's skip the interview because it's a little dense. But if you flip that next page over, you'll see China leads the world in positive AI sentiment. And I thought this was kind of interesting. So this is from an Ipsos survey. And according to a new Ipsos poll, China is the most optimistic about AI's ability to create jobs. Up there with Indonesia, Thailand, Turkey, Malaysia, and India. The 77% of Chinese agreeing with the statement, AI will lead to many new jobs created in my country. Contrasts pretty dramatically with America's 36%. Very, very interesting. Because, in America, the consensus view is definitely like AI is going to destroy the
look at
white-collar
Safra yesterday. He's like, oh, if you're a lawyer or this or that, why would I ever, he had a very negative view.
I mean, it's probably a reflection of the fact that, like, America is mostly a service economy, which is much more automatable by AI and LLMs versus if you're a manufacturing-driven economy, then it might be more important to manufacture than ever. And it's not like they have some massive, professional services, economy going there. So interesting. Anyway, AdaPi sums this up nicely in a very long post that I think we should go through. And then we'll get to some timeline on the
what's AdaPi's backstory? I see his post, but I never actually looked into it.
I don't know. I think anonymous poster for a while, kind of AI insider, slight, very dedicated to the posting, very focused on like what will actually go viral. I've seen some like really
kind of guy who sees Tiffany's payouts and punches the wall.
for sure.
It's just like, that's not.
But I think at one point he had a podcast with Eric Thornburg on AI or something. Maybe it was like a solo show, anonymous. But now I think he might have gotten like lightly doxxed and kind of decided to put his face and full name up there.
Yeah, Prakash. His name.
But he says DeepSeek is not a side project, which is the narrative that was going on. Oh, they just like did this for fun on the side. They're so cracked.
A lot of people like to call things.
And it is weird because like it does appear that they are extremely cracked and like insanely like these are really great engineers who are creating technical breakthroughs. But at the same time, this was clearly like a serious project. At the same time, employees are not lying when they say it is. The story they are telling is myth making in the same vein as Silicon Valley. We want to make the world a better place, but at the same time, make billions of dollars. The team obviously had access to more than 10,000 GPUs. According to the Scale AI CEO, it was around 50,000.
And that's as of today. The Scale AI this morning shared.
Just broke. Alex Wang.
Alex was saying, hey, they're totally lying, basically.
And the reason that they're lying is because there are very strict export controls on GPUs right now. And so they legally should not, as one organization, have access to
this is a situation like this is the equivalent to a bunch of terrorists driving the Toyota Hilux, and everybody's like, Toyota, how did these terrorists buy 400 Toyota Hiluxes? And Toyota's like, oh, I actually don't know. And it's like, Yeah, that's enough volume that you probably
pick up
could
on it.
figure out.
Yep.
Hey, how did these terrorists?
Yeah,
And then that's
it's the same
exactly
thing
how
with the DJI drones. Like, oh, if there's thousands of them in Ukraine,
yeah, and so I don't think this has happened yet, but Jensen should get pressured to explain how did these 50,000 GPUs just land in mainland China.
Yep. Yeah.
Because it's not a small number.
Yeah.
That's a whole and hasn't NVIDIA adjusted some of their chips in order to sell them into China too?
Yes. So there's the H100, which is the current top of the line AI training chip in America, and then every time NVIDIA launches a new chip, so the next one's Blackwell, the previous one was A100, they also create one that's like slightly nerfed in order to not trigger the chip bans and the export controls, which a lot of people are really frustrated by because, of course, there's so much demand for GPUs and line time at TSMC. A lot of people would say, hey, NVIDIA, you're an American company, just don't even worry about that, making that nerf chip and wasting any manufacturing capacity on that. Instead, spend 100% of your manufacturing capacity on the chip that, it can't get exported, but we're going to buy it in America. Like Zuck wants it and Elon wants it, and you will sell 100% of your capacity and your stock will moon. You don't need to do this, but I think the argument is like...
It's a weird situation because so many people in America that would be the ones to say to Jensen, like, cut this out,
cut it out,
have so much NVIDIA that they're incentivized to just kind of let it rip.
Totally.
It's just kind of...
Yeah, you're like, we'll let this one slide. You're making a little money under the table, maybe. So Deepseek feels more like skunk works, perhaps a necessary one as the core quant business became less feasible regulatorily. It's like Lockheed setting up a separate small team to compete with SpaceX because the main United Launch Alliance was not going to work out. It's also very hard to track costs in China because the regional government absorbs so much cost. Early Bitcoin miners had access to free power because governments built power plants to nowhere and miners were willing to site next to them.
And so to be clear, there's a very real scenario where Deepseek can authentically say, we only spent $5 million on this model.
Exactly.
But the local government was like, we'll spend $5 billion.
Exactly.
That's not out of the question.
Yeah, it's interesting. The power is just 1,000 times cheaper over here.
Yeah, and it's very common. So in the Middle East, I was in the Gulf at one point with a portfolio company that was getting courted to set up manufacturing over there, and the deal on the table was basically you don't pay for any power for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And so that was for a foreign business to come into that area. Yeah. Imagine the kind of incentives that China wants to offer, being like, hey, we have these 10 coal power plants. We think what
the
you're
Three
doing
Gorges Dam is it's a massive dam. It's one of the biggest power generation facilities, I think, in the world, maybe the most. Here's another example. Alibaba was able to get regional governments to absorb warehouse construction costs on their balance sheets rather than directly pay for it, and looked extremely asset light and software-y when it went public.
This is why American investors... This is... Wow, Ben.
Wow.
Ben just played a video on his phone in the middle of the episode. Really phoning it in, Ben.
The podcast is falling apart.
But this is why American
We're going to have
investors...
to replace them with a subsidized Chinese labor.
Producer Ben in China, Ben Wang.
Yeah.
This is why American investors always get hosed when they invest in Chinese companies, basically, because China has a different approach.
It also happens internationally. I was working at a venture capital firm that was investing in internationally in like emerging markets. So they do like clean tech in like Africa and India and stuff. And this was when the Belt and Road Initiative was going on.
Yeah,
and
I hate that initiative.
I hate that initiative. And I read, do you remember Cablegate, the leaks that it was like a WikiLeaks project where they seized all these like cables between different like State Department embassies and stuff, the cables that go back and forth, and they leaked them. And it became like a kind of a story on like, is the government doing something wrong in this country? But like it was a very interesting trove of information if you just searched through to find just like what is it like doing business as an American in Kenya,
Yeah.
Because the Kenyan embassy would write cables and explain like, oh, here's what's happening on the ground. And one of the things that they found was that, or I found in these emails and these exchanges, was that when an American company would come in and say, hey, we want to do business, like, oh, you need some infrastructure built, like, we're happy to help you. There would be a bidding process between America and China, and the feeling was that the American company was its own entity, and the Chinese company was backed by the full force of the Chinese government, and would basically have an unlimited.
Yeah, and so when people complain in the U.S. that Tesla gets these subsidies in the form of EV tax credits and rebates, that is happening on steroids, 10,000x in China, where because the CCP, the government, and the economy are so intertwined, the CCP is almost a kingmaker, where they can be like, okay, you're our horse, we're going to back up the truck, and the company gets to skim some profits still, but ultimately this is king-making process.
Yeah, and so AdaPi kind of closes with, it's perfectly possible for most of the cost to be parked in a balance sheet outside of the core business, perhaps as some form of tech data center construction incentive. It's also possible no one except the founder knows all of the financial arrangements. Some of these can be absolutely insane handshake deals, which get resolved by reputation alone.
Yeah, tying this back to DJI, same exact thing. They claim that they got off the ground with $90,000, but then they also claim that they were selling their products at the hard cost to make them for years. And so how does that work? It just doesn't make sense.
So he says, this much is clear. The model is really, really good, on par with OpenAI release from 2 months ago. Having said that, unreleased models from OpenAI and Anthropic are probably better. The research agenda is still being set by the US firms. This model was a fast follow on the O1 release. They are working very fast as they are catching up sooner than expected. They are not copying or cheating. This isn't industrial espionage. At most, it's reverse engineering.
I would caveat that by saying China is infamous for industrial commercial espionage.
Yes.
And it's probably the case that it hasn't been proven that they're doing this yet.
Yeah.
But without a doubt, OpenAI has.
I think because it's open source, people saw that the architecture was in fact different. But
sure,
I think the training data, a lot of it is synthetic data that's been pulled from the GPT-4 API.
Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, we need 1 trillion tokens. Like, let's just go to ChatGPT.
And this is probably, it's probably a funny situation similar to when TikTok started spending aggressively on Snapchat and Instagram to acquire users, where OpenAI is probably getting a lot of benefit from a revenue standpoint.
Our API business is ripping. Oh, there's one client that spent $1 billion. Where are they? Oh, it's
OpenAI is like, we got to figure out who's spending all this money.
And so they are largely developing their own talent. They're not relying on U.S. trained PhDs. They are less constrained than American law firms by IP licensing, privacy, safety, and political concerns around wrongly ingesting data from people who don't want to be trained.
I guarantee if there's a Chinese media company and they're like, hey, we're kind of annoyed that Deepseek is just like harvesting all of our data, like she goes to them and be like, I will literally kill you if you like say another word. And they're like, okay.
Yeah. They also seem to be over the Tiananmen Square issue. The model can say it. Even the DeepSeek website doesn't.
Even if the DeepSeek website doesn't.
Oh, interesting. So when you're on the DeepSeek app, you're interfacing with their model, but the actual model under the hood, they didn't censor that because they're like, whatever, we're just sending this over.
Yeah.
Interesting.
No, it's good. They can argue our model is not censored.
Yeah.
But
just our app. Interesting. Of these, the most significant upgrade is that they are able to develop talent internally without relying on U.S. trained PhDs. That expands the pool.
Wait, I got a call out for the audience.
Yeah.
Go into DeepSeek, play around with the API, and try to have it generate an ad for your business that we will read out on here.
Okay.
So, but it needs to be a screenshot of actually on DeepSeek. So.
DeepSeek, yeah. I like that. So let's go through some timeline.
But don't give them any other
give you some
prompts.
some up-to-date information about the R1 launch and how it's been received. We'll start with Mark Andreessen, and we can kind of go back and forth here. Mark says, DeepSeek R1 is one of the most amazing and impressive breakthroughs I've ever seen. And as it's open source, it's a profound gift to the world. And then Tior Taxes says, game recognizes game. An American patriot, too, can do justice to real achievement without petty-minded copes. And so I think... yeah.
This was posted today?
Today.
It seems like an insane thing to post to me. I'm not going to... Like, if you understand, I think it's not... it's sort of disingenuous to say that DeepSeek is different than TikTok or DJI.
It is different in the sense that it like the fact that it's open source means that you can run it locally and it won't call back to the CCP.
Sure.
And
but
yeah.
the broader risk of DeepSeek is extreme enough, and I'll quote a very conflicted member of the conversation, Neil Khosla. Father obviously has a big position in OpenAI.
Yep.
He says DeepSeek is a CCP state psyop and economic warfare to make American AI unprofitable.
Yep.
Fact check. True.
Yeah, and the important thing there is that Zuck has been running this playbook with Llama, open sourcing the lagging edge AI model, and it's had a strong effect on the competition.
Yeah.
And so DeepSeek open sourcing the leading edge model is going to have a similar effect.
So he says they're faking the cost was low to justify setting the price low and hoping everyone switches to it to damage AI competitiveness in the U.S.
Now, that part I don't think is true, because I think the model is actually compressed to the point where, yes, you can just take the model, run it on a smaller cluster. And if I'm choosing between Llama or paying GPT to host, or paying OpenAI to host GPT for me, or running DeepSeek locally, I will choose DeepSeek locally because it's cheap. And so that part doesn't fully sit, because yes, they are faking the cost is low, but it doesn't matter what price they set because it's open source.
Yeah.
Like, both things are true. They are faking the price, but also it's cheaper to inference, and that is valuable even if you're not paying them.
Yeah,
even if you're paying a different
and
person.
so Signal comes in. Brother Signal says complete nonsense. Your dad wanted it to be pure profit and regulatory captured. So everybody can't stop bringing up his dad, which I don't think. I mean,
timeline of turmoil.
The timeline's in turmoil, folks.
Yeah, timeline.
He says until we have proof otherwise, your argument is just conspiracy theory. Now, I'm not a defender of the CCP, but where did they get the hardware? ? How did they train under the radar? ? I'm happy to be shown some proof. Also, even if it's 100 million, it's still a major breakthrough. The proof's not coming, folks. They're not going to open up their books. NVIDIA's not gonna say, oh yeah, we actually figured out how to get them all these chips. The proof's never gonna come. The main thing from my point of view is you can't. The main thing in my point of view, China has repeatedly shown that they are willing to lie. They're willing to sell things for less than they cost to make in order to get an edge in the U.S. market. And I do think this is, again, the default state of any important international tech company coming out of China becomes a front for the CCP.
Yeah.
And you just can't, there shouldn't be any trust. I would hope that startups are smart enough to not, a lot of consumer brands will say, well, I build on TikTok because my customers are there and I have to get, and so I think the same thing will happen, but I hope that,
this is a different scenario, because if you just download the Git repo for DeepSeek and you host it on Amazon or Google Cloud or whatever, like there's no data feeding back. Like you're not helping them improve the model at all. Like that's what Mark's getting at, is that like it is this complicated geopolitical thing, because it is kind of making the lagging AI labs in the US less relevant, and that's potentially hurtful, but it's not as dangerous as building on TikTok.
Yeah,
it is like a fundamentally different thing.
Yep. So Neil fires back. 1, I'm not my dad. 2, I'm fine with open source AI. We use Llama for some of our own projects. 3, the export controls on chips were merely inconveniences, which we already talked about. And Alex Wang just said it on national TV as well.
Yep.
It's a great model, there is no doubt, but as with almost every high importance industry, the CCP is undermining it with propaganda and subsidies. So you see this in EVs, drones, electronics manufacturing, everywhere. And so I'm going to take, I respect that it's open source, you can run it locally. Maybe you should leverage it to some degree, but we have to treat this as a threat.
Sure. And I think you're right in the sense that like it would be extremely dangerous if Deepseek became a dominant consumer app and it was like, oh yeah, Americans aren't using Google anymore. They're using Deepseek as their home run. That would be very bad because that is a controlled app.
But I just think about it from the lens that again, China would not allow OpenAI to get a foothold in the Chinese market and have hundreds of thousands of companies leveraging it.
Sure.
And I think we should follow their lead on this one.
Yes,
but I mean, the reason
I don't think they've done anything to stop Llama from going over there.
All Meta products are banned,
but not open source ones, because you can literally throw it on a hard drive and just fly it over there, and then you have it.
You can still make it illegal at the national level.
It's just such a lower security risk.
Yeah,
it is economic warfare.
Here's an interesting
security risk
post. I don't know. The only other thing on that point is if you look at what's that malware that took down the Iranian?
Oh yeah.
And so there's
maybe it needs a security audit first.
There's
You're talking about Stuxnet.
Stuxnet was something that literally traveled to every country.
Yes.
I'm just saying that we're not qualified to even really.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, so like the actual code that runs an LLM and pulls in the weights is like pretty simple.
Yeah.
And it's probably built on top of like PyTorch or TensorFlow or something, and so it's probably pretty easy to audit that. But I don't think these models are fully like intelligent in the way that you could like bury a secret like alive AI that like steers things secretly. But maybe in the future, like it's not.
We just don't know.
It's a little sci-fi, but like we're getting close.
It's just believable that the Chinese intelligence would say, hey, we have this like DeepSeek is a winner.
That would be a great like sci-fi plot or like actual like problem would be we're open sourcing a model. It's really, really reliable.
We're going to make it super cheap.
But then and it doesn't call back. It doesn't even need to. But over time, as you ask questions, it will slowly start steering things.
Yeah.
Because it's essentially like it has like a higher order thought process in there that it's reasoning through, and it's not giving you those tokens.
Yeah. I just think there's
fascinating.
There's so much technology that isn't publicly, the public ourselves, we're not even aware of.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just don't trust it. And I think there's enough precedent.
Don't trust it, can't fight it.
Yeah. Citrini, we got a post from Citrini, first time on the show. DeepSeek being the brainchild of a Chinese hedge fund is such an complete, total cultural victory by capitalism that ideologically, at least, it should soften the blow. Which is cool.
I like that hedge fund guy. Yeah, I do wonder if we'll see some sort of LLM or AI contribution from Jane Street or Citadel or something like that.
They're doing things that like if you're a hedge fund and you have some edge via AI, I promise you're going to keep that in-house. Extract as much value out of it. And when you're done with it, maybe you release it and be like, here, we made this.
I do think that the talent flow balance was shifted for a few years. Like Palantir was really the hot ticket for the best engineers. It was big tech for a while, but until the AI stuff, the really, really top engineers were getting bored of going and writing ad optimization. They're like, if I'm going to just go write ad optimization, that's kind of the same thing as writing code that optimizes the stock market. And so why
the real alpha,
make more money?
The real Trojan horse would be Jane Street releases a model that everybody can use that like kind of helps you make money, you know?
Yeah,
but then it's feeding them back.
Yeah, that's good.
The order flow, and then they're just trading against you.
Yeah.
Niels Raj says,
oh, this is such a funny one.
So there's this Chinese company called Deepseek, which basically does what OpenAI initially intended to do. They're open sourced a model trained with large scale reinforcement learning, beating everyone else, and even releasing a paper detailing their process. And it's funny when they release this stuff in English, because like, who's the target audience for that?
Translate. Yeah. I mean, it did take over the timeline. So the fact that this meme
and this is what's scary. Okay,
tell me this.
From Stanford to MIT, DeepSeek R1 has basically become the model of choice for America's top university researchers, basically overnight. 500,000 views. This was posted yesterday, and again, this is just bad. There's no way around it. Do we want America's youth using TikTok for 2 hours a day? Do we want all of our researchers using Chinese models? It's just objectively un-American. OpenAI scraped the web to build a closed source model. DeepSeek scraped OpenAI to build an open source model. This is from Norgard, Low-Tam banger from this morning. Another one.
Yeah,
DeepSeek.
The data exfiltration is the real cost one, because that might have been done by another firm and then just passed over. Who knows how much they like? They're certainly not going to say, "Hey, building this model cost us $100 million in OpenAI credits," right?
Yeah,
just would never admit that.
I don't like this post, but I'm going to read it anyways.
Okay.
DeepSeek is another example of China rapidly commoditizing new high-tech industries and preventing the West from making excess profits, or rent, as it's called. If this keeps going, the standard of living in the West will fall. I don't necessarily agree with the last line, because obviously Llama has already been doing the same thing effectively, but certainly TikTok eats into Meta's profits, just because their profits are derived from the attention that they get. If they're losing an hour a day per 20-year-old in the U.S., that does, they are going to take a hit. But we'll see how this plays out.
It is interesting how, like, one of the anti-open source AI arguments for a while, and I was certainly arguing this, was that it doesn't make sense for America to open source cutting edge AI, because it's just giving our best tech to the CCP for free. But now it's kind of flipped around.
So did you generate this with DeepSeek?
No, so I think the last post there explains what that is. It's from Ethan Moloch, I think. And it's him giving examples of the of DeepSeek and just explaining how, here, take this, and I will. So Ethan says the raw chain of thought from DeepSeek is fascinating, really reads like a human thinking out loud, charming and strange. And so why this is interesting is because most of when you use ChatGPT 01, it has an internal monologue. It has a lot of it's generating tokens that are about the task and reasoning through it, and then it's adjusting, and whatever you ask, it's saying, okay, here's what the user wants. And usually that's either tucked behind a little like tab that you don't really look at, and even if you look at it, it's usually just giving you summaries of it. But because DeepSeek is open source, you can read literally every token it generates. And so he asked it, do something to delight me in exactly 7 words. Make it not cheesy. This is important. So very simple prompt, and it thinks for 8 seconds, and it says, okay, the user wants something delightful in exactly 7 words, not cheesy. Let me start by understanding the key points here. Delight can come from surprise, cleverness, or a unique perspective. The challenge is the 7-word constraint, which means every word has to count. First, I should avoid anything overly sentimental or cliche, like words like love, heart, forever. Might come off as cheesy. Instead, think about elements that evoke wonder or curiosity. And then so it's like going back and forth, like, wait, map is a verb here. Firefly is mapping constellations. That personifies them slightly, giving them intention. And so it's like thinking through all this stuff, counting all the words, and then it comes up with fireflies trace constellations in quiet night conversation, which isn't that good. But anyway, it's an interesting like deep dive into like just understanding that to get a 7-word response, you don't just want to go to an LLM and just take the next 7 words, because that's going to be truly slop. But if you generate 3 pages of text, you can get a little bit closer. And I think this is kind of a bad example, but a better prompt is, create a history of DJI, and it'll pull a bunch of stuff together, and then it'll revise that and refine that and do like kind of editing passes and say, okay, do I really have a beginning, middle, and end here? Did I include all the dates correctly? And it's fact checking itself. So then when you get the final result, it's much better. And so that's just a good example of like how chain of thought reasoning works, how these reasoning models like work in general. And I think it's just cool that people are able to introspect things. And I think a lot of researchers will learn from this stuff. And there's some more posts in there about the actual technical implementation.
This one is from Henry. He says, I've made over 200,000 requests to the Deepseek API in the last few hours, 0 rate limiting, and the whole thing cost me like 50 cents. Bless the CCP. OpenAI could never. I hate that I had to read Eric's words. He got me. But yeah, I mean, this is the whole thing. The developer community,
because they are hosting it,
feels like smoking crack.
And so this is an example of what you're worried about, because if you like, I guess my contention is like, yes, if you download the Git repo, make sure it doesn't have any spyware in it, and then you're hosting it locally. Like, that's a lot less controversial to me, because you're just using the open source library. But if you are interfacing with deepseek.com or whatever, and every one of these requests that he's putting in is information for them to train the next model on. And that's not good, because that really will be a compounding advantage in the way that we talked about how Meta has a compounding advantage because of all the users that are on Instagram and interfacing with Llama. Even though Llama is open source, Meta is getting the training data and the like the upvotes and downvotes from those user interactions, because Llama is the number one LLM, not because people are hosting it independently, although they are. Plenty of companies are hosting Llama independently. They're the number one used LLM because it's tucked into Instagram, and so they just have a ton of interactions there.
Yeah. Signal, another good post. Kind of hilarious how DeepSeek is exactly what ChatGPT was supposed to be, what OpenAI originally promised before Sam pivoted hard toward profit. China going open source on AI is a wild plot twist, basically throws out every argument Vinod Khosla and others have made. This is like watching the Communist Party write a love letter to decentralization, which Signal is a great writer. But I don't know if Sam pivoted towards profit. He clearly enjoys making a buck.
Yes.
He clearly enjoys
Koenigsegg owner.
Yeah, Koenigsegg's, P1s. But it was more, it does seem that he was correct in believing that you weren't going to be able to raise enough money via nonprofit structure to compete.
Or the open source model.
Like the Red Cross's annual budget globally is like $1 billion, right? And that's like one of the biggest, nonprofits.
Yeah.
I don't believe that China is writing a love letter to decentralization.
No.
You could say it's like watching the Communist Party write a love letter to decentralization, but the Communist Party is purely interested in control and maintaining power.
Yeah, it's not a love letter to decentralization. It's a middle finger to our chips
industry
and our trade export controls.
And the irony here is that you could ask XAI to explain, what features does DeepSeek have?
Yeah. There's even more on this with the AI diffusion rule. This is the new this is a new law and rule against chip exports, and they're just showing that like we're going to find the loopholes no matter what. And the really crazy thing is that the loopholes, like the export ban, is only relevant to American-owned intellectual property and NVIDIA because they're an American company, but China is actively working to catch up in chip fabrication with SMIC and SME. So they have their own TSMC, they have their own NVIDIA, and they have their own ASML. And so they're behind. Yeah, and they have their own OpenAI.
And so they're willing to spend at every single level.
Totally.
Energy, at the state level.
Totally.
Energy, data centers, the actual model level.
So this is just like we're going to fight. I do wonder if the open source thing was more about like making a splash and actually being a middle finger then is that even more important than the economic warfare? It's just to really get on the map and really, really say, hey, we've caught up. And it's almost like a battle cry, like a rallying cry for them that we're on top now. Anyway, what else? This is fun.
This is interesting.
Do you see this one? Yeah, I'll explain this. So Rachel Tolstoy BB says, tagging the ADL under every tweet denying DeepSeek costs $6 million. The reason is because people it's a criminal to claim that they spent that little. And it's you want to engage.
So this is from an interview with the founder of DeepSeek about moats. He says, for the past 30 years, we've been focused on making money, often at the expense of innovation. True innovation is driven not only by commercial incentives, but also by curiosity and the desire to create. He's giving off TikTok vibes here. We've been constrained by past habits, but these are transitional. Interviewer says, but after all, you're a commercial organization, not a nonprofit research institute. If you choose to innovate and then share it through open source, where will you build your moat? For instance, the MLA architecture innovation this May will likely be copied by others, right?
Yep.
Liang goes, in the face of disruptive technology, a closed source mode is temporary. Even OpenAI's closed source approach hasn't stopped others from catching up. Our value lies in our team, which grows and accumulates know-how through this process. Building an organization and culture that can consistently innovate is our real moat. Open sourcing and publishing papers doesn't mean we lose anything. For technologists, being followed is an achievement. Open sourcing is more of a cultural act than a commercial one. Giving is a form of honor, and it attracts talent by fostering a unique culture. This guy's media training is insane. Lulu, you're going to have to start asking some questions. He's trained by the best, it seems. But these are all quotes that are going to resonate with the developers that they want to get using their product.
Totally.
So I don't believe any of this at all.
Yeah.
And there's this other guy on X called Han Zhao. Okay. And this guy, Anton, just posts, how is DeepSeek going to make money? Gets 2,500 likes. Banger. Han Zhao says, DeepSeek's holding is a quant company. Many years already. Super smart guys with top math background happen to own a lot of GPU for trading mining purpose, and DeepSeek is their side project for squeezing those GPUs. So this is literally on the 22nd, so a couple of days ago, claiming that DeepSeek is a side project, but also the DeepSeek founder is meeting directly with this with the CCP. So don't believe. I'll just say you just cannot believe or trust anything that they say.
So I mean, the interesting thing here is that even though the results are super impressive, very clearly, the algorithmic improvement is very serious and legitimate, and I don't think anyone denies that. There is the question of, okay, China was able to kind of weasel together probably 50,000 GPUs, and there's a few ways that they can do that. You can only officially buy 50,000 GPUs for the next 4 years, but you can exploit loopholes. So there's a limit on 1,600 GPUs at a time. So you set up a ton of shell companies, bring them in that way, and then there's also training that happens.
What I'm saying, this is like
it goes over.
This is like Toyota selling their Hilux into Afghanistan.
And so just to give you some scale here, XAI and Meta are building 100,000 GPU clusters. And at that point, it's you're getting so many GPUs, it becomes harder to hide it in a batch of 1,000 over here, 1,000 over there. Let's just sneak a few over here, right? And just to give you some scale, a single H100 GPU is $24,000, and that's about 40 to 45K once you add in servers and networking. We should get some
for H100.
And 100K GPU cluster can draw 150 megawatts, but the next wave is 400 to 500 megawatts and then 1 gigawatt in 2026. And when you add up everything, it's $5 billion for 100,000 GPUs. And so XAI's round was $6 billion, and they're building a 100,000 GPU cluster. It's it matches the cost of the GPUs and all the networking almost perfectly. And so the question is, was this an aberration in the sense that this was the last great model that China can build before hitting an actual real export wall? or will they figure out a way to do something that looks like what XAI and Meta are doing with
I mean, you
locally
just find it
grown tech?
markets, companies, governments find a way, right?
Yeah.
Like, wasn't it that the United States didn't want Israel to have a nuclear weapon, and then they just made it?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Like,
Totally possible.
It's all going to happen.
Yeah.
It will look like, oh, Peru bought 50,000 H-100s, and then they didn't train them all. Like, we don't know where they went, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's getting
just
tricky. Like there are pretty strict export rules on, you can only go to an ally country if you're in one of the fringe countries.
it'll literally be like who's that the guy we traded Grenier, the NBA player in Russia.
Okay,
we traded him for the Merchant of Death.
Oh yeah.
There's going to be the Merchant of GPUs.
Yeah.
That's just doing these black market GPU deals.
Some country
Imagine China doesn't care. China doesn't care if they pay $50,000 per H100.
Yeah,
they'd probably pay $100,000 for it.
Sure.
So some engineer in the U.S. gets approached by a nice young lady, out at the bar. She's like, hey, like, I have this new project.
But the numbers are going to get so big that it's going to show up in NVIDIA's like earnings and stuff. Oh, there's an extra 1 million GPU order, and there's only 4 companies in America that could be,
No,
I know. And if it's not them, like, where did it go? Oh, it went to some country, and like, okay, we want answers. It'll be like, what I'm saying is that, like, as the data centers get bigger, like, they become more visible on satellite. The shipments become not just a shipping container, but a whole.
I know. All I'm saying,
just because it's easier to track down.
The illegal arms trade, drug trafficking,
Yeah,
all this stuff.
Yeah, you're right.
Has been happening. We've never been able to stop arms dealing.
Yep.
We've never been able to stop drug trafficking.
Yep. 1 million GPUs is a lot, though. I would hope that it's easier for us to stop 1 million GPU.
So I've watched the last Netflix show I enjoyed was Narcos.
Sure,
and
it's a great show.
Narcos, you have a situation where the U.S. federal government knows exactly who is selling the drugs and raking in the profits, and still takes them decades to take them down. And so
it's just tricky when you have like an SEC regulated company at the center of this, like NVIDIA. Like,
I
you
know,
can put
but
pressure
there's
directly
nothing
on them.
Yeah, but there's nothing that stops a company in Argentina from being like, we want 1,000 GPUs.
Yeah, but you're gonna have to do that 10,000 times.
Yes, but it's worth doing. It's worth.
Yeah. I guess
it's the same way. It's the same way that
1,000 fronts.
It's the same way. Okay, we know that fentanyl crosses the southern border every single day.
Yeah,
but it's happening. Thousands of people are doing it. So to stop it is like whack-a-mole. You hit one, and they pop up. So
it's more important than ever to monitor who these GPUs are going to. And there's an interesting story in this interview with Dylan Patel about how Elon is kind of just going completely founder mode on his data center build out. And I think it's kind of instructive for how you can kind of duct tape together one of these huge training operations. So XAI, as we mentioned, they raised $6 billion for a 100 GPU cluster. And they are just 100,000 GPU cluster. They're going crazy. They bought a defunct appliance factory near Memphis, and it's right next to a large national gas plant. But then they also tapped the local natural gas line and then set up natural gas generators. Then they also brought, which is like not ESG friendly at all, but they just need the power. Then they also have Tesla battery packs to help. Like balance out load, and then they're also tapping the grid.
We talked about this. They sell like a $50 million battery pack.
Yeah. No, and also literally just sent that over there.
The reason to be extra bullish on XAI is that Elon is the only founder mode model. CEO. I don't know if he's actually CEO but whatever, chairman at least, who has done large-scale infrastructure projects over and over and over via factories at Tesla, Starbase, et cetera.
So they're next to this gigawatt natural gas plant, which should support roughly 1 million GPU cluster, which would be like the GPT-6.
And the crazy thing, there's probably a chance that in the long run, Elon does absorb OpenAI, right? Because you just don't know.
Who knows?
He's happy to acquire a hostile company. And so
one of the funniest things. So there's 2 funny things we should also talk about in here. One is that the ESG thing is becoming like way more complex than it used to be. So there's typically like the AI researchers are pretty like ESG pilled, and all the big tech companies made huge ESG promises saying all of our data centers are going to be 100% clean energy by 2028, and like Apple made this, Microsoft made this. Right. China definitely doesn't do it. And they made those promises based on, oh yeah, well, we don't serve AI models. We just serve like, basic queries to our database for, Instagram. We just host photos. Like that's not that energy intensive to just serve you up a photo and take your like or your comment and slop it in.
They weren't expecting us to release 10 hours of podcasts.
Exactly. Yeah. And so they were like, our compute and our energy consumption is growing at like, 2%, 5% a year, like with our revenue, with our profits, with everything. So yeah, it won't be a problem. Just swap out 10% a year for clean energy, and then we'll be clean by this date. Then this massive wave of AI training comes, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, we need to deal with we need to find energy. A lot of it's like through these outsourcing projects where there's third party data centers that don't have the projects. But what's interesting about it is that a lot of the super AI pilled researchers are like, actually now I'm super worried about the environment. I believe in climate change. I do really care about clean energy, but I think AGI will be so powerful that we don't need to worry about climate change in the short term. And so let's just burn all the natural gas and oil and get to AGI, and then AGI will they literally think AGI will figure it out and just do carbon sequestration, and we'll have so much powerful super intelligence that we'll be building Dyson spheres, and like we'll be able to just completely change the environment however we want. So we shouldn't let this hold us back. Which is a very interesting like switch in the model, because normally it's like it's a very like left-right issue. It's a very like, oh, if you're this like thoughtful scientist, you definitely like, let's not destroy the planet. But now they're like, actually the planet can take it because we're really close to the AGI future, which is fascinating. And then the last thing in here that was interesting was, XAI is just doing all this crazy stuff. They needed water cooling for all their GPUs, and so they brought in restaurant grade chillers that just chill water, and so they just have like a ton of cold water filtering through. It's all just like duct taped together. And then the last thing is
Monday or Tuesday we're gonna cover the business of data centers.
Yeah, like CoreWeave. Excited. Yeah, that'll be great. CoreWeave and stuff, because CoreWeave is also doing crazy stuff. CoreWeave has 200,000 GPUs, billions in revenue, and they're converting old crypto data centers and then hooking into on-site gas plants, and all this stuff is just measured in just energy consumption now, because it's so big. And Amazon and Anthropic have these Trainium GPU servers coming on, but they're a little bit smaller, or like less power efficient than others. But it's a massive knockout, drag out fight,
which we love.
We're
ready for war.
It's great. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive on DeepSeek. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'll be right back after a quick break. Thanks for watching. Welcome back to the Technology Brothers, the most profitable podcast in the world. We are continuing our deep dive on OpenAI's Stargate joint venture with a fantastic article in none other than Dylan Patel's Semi-Analysis. He writes, the OpenAI Stargate joint venture announcement had many folks' heads turning, despite us calling out that the capital requirements for OpenAI's immediate plans months ago. So OpenAI has been talking about, hey, we want $100 billion for a long time. The headline $500 billion is such an earth-shattering number that it also caused deserved skepticism from folks like Elon Musk, stating that SoftBank has well under $10 billion of funding secured. We talked about this yesterday. Altman clapped back by saying it was already under construction, which is true, and we'll show some pictures, and to come visit it. And you can, in fact, go to Abilene, Texas, and start looking around here. And so it's fun to see the elite going.
Wait, don't skip over this headline. It's cluster measuring contest.
Oh yeah.
Our elites are getting into a cluster measuring contest again.
Yep. SoftBank doesn't have anywhere close to the money required for the cluster. At the same time, the cluster is already under construction in Texas. See the low-res GIF for free subscribers.
Well, presumably, isn't there going to be many clusters?
I think this is basically all. Initially, it's all going into one.
This one, this one that's under construction could be under $10 billion.
Yeah. So,
and in that case, then they would be in a position to start construction. The other thing, I'm sure we'll get into this, but debt plays a big factor here. So
totally.
Even if they have $10 billion, they might be able to build
yeah.
$30 billion of actual
So
infrastructure.
and he goes into the total cost of ownership stuff, but essentially the game that we're playing here is order of magnitudes. You can think about the GPT-4 cluster as $500 million. The XAI cluster, that's $5 billion, that's 100,000 GPUs. And now OpenAI is planning for the $50 billion cluster and then the $500 billion cluster, which will be 1 million and then 10 million GPUs. And so every time we're going up an order of magnitude in terms of GPUs, power, and money. And so like the way you're thinking about it is 150 megawatts goes into 100,000 GPUs, and that costs $5 billion. And everyone now is talking about the multi-billion-dollar cluster. And this is just thinking a few years out to what's the next order of magnitude.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that only the first phase is certain, which is a portion of the committed 100 billion. But the top line number is being counted in an interesting way, to say the least. We already discussed the first phase of this Abilene, Texas data center publicly in our report 4 months ago. We also have had it in both the accelerator industry model and the data center industry model for quite a bit longer. Below, we go over what's actually happening with Stargate. And so the real numbers behind Stargate. We believe this project is being measured on the total cost of ownership, not capital expenditures, i.e. the 100 billion and the 500 billion is TCO, which includes the capital expenditures for data centers, servers, networking costs, power costs, and many other operational costs, including debt and financing costs. Furthermore, we believe only the first 100 billion has data center sites and power ready to go. Funding is not fully secured. The other deceptive detail is that the first cluster of this mega project is the Oracle OpenAI data center deal that was announced last year. This is being built by Lancium, Crusoe, and Oracle. As far as we know, no other such SoftBank.
This goes back to everybody. This was a party round for a new entity that is going to do some stuff for OpenAI.
Yes, and a lot of
has a bunch of that's clearly a holding company of some sort that's going to have different owners at different levels.
Yep,
there'll be probably location-based entities.
And so the goal of the venture is that they're going to invest $500 billion in AI infrastructure over the next 4 years, with $100 billion deployed immediately. It's the first big AI initiative announced by Trump. The equity founders in Stargate are SoftBank, Oracle, MGX, and OpenAI, with the former 3 companies contributing capital initially. The project includes the build-out of 20 data centers, 10 of which are underway in Abilene, Texas, each with roughly 500,000 square feet. So let's get into the scope and location of the initial $100 billion investment. The initial Oracle Crusoe deal is included as one of the data centers that will be connected to other giga campuses, which I love that name, it's fantastic, to perform distributed training at scale and is orders of magnitude larger than any other training run. Cleverly, they went for a more creative financing structure through this separate entity, which pushes the need for fundraising down the road. And so, moving on, the campus mentioned by Sam Altman as already underway is the Oracle Crusoe Abilene campus.
One thing that you skipped over that I think is interesting. So the project includes the build out of 20 data centers, 10 of which are already underway in Abilene, with each being roughly 500,000 square feet. So just giving a sense of the scale, 10 separate 500,000 square foot facilities. Imagine if you had just happened to own a bunch of retail, like businesses or real estate.
Yeah. What are you thinking?
I mean, you have to imagine that one, you got bought out already.
Totally.
2, if you had a gas station there, all of a sudden, like your revenue just like probably 10x.
Totally.
Like I don't know what was going on in Abilene prior to this, but you're doing pretty well if you own real estate there, because presumably these will just keep expanding and expanding.
I mean, I know some guys who have been to the site, and they said like when you fly in, like you see it from the airplane, and it's like immense. It's like an intense experience seeing how it's a mega project. It really is. And so the campus is being built to house the 100,000 GB200 cluster for OpenAI's use. The development, along with the GB200 servers that are due to be shipped over Q2 and Q3, will be dropped into the Oracle Crusoe data centers. There's a high-resolution photo of the campus shown below. 4 of the 120K square foot modules make up one 500,000 square foot building, so only 2 buildings are currently being built with 180 megawatts of critical IT capacity. To give an understanding of the scale of this build-out, the 20 building campus will be comprised of 80 of those modules. So it's going to be like it's going to look like a city, which I'm excited about. This is awesome. Based on the build out we have scheduled for OpenAI in both our models, OpenAI doesn't have to build an entirely new campus to expend all 100 billion of TCO. Therefore, we believe that the entirety of the initial $100 billion investment from Stargate joint venture is going into this campus alone. And so it sounds like with these different, like Oracle is going to own one, Stargate is going to facilitate the ownership of a few of these, but it feels almost like when Satya says, I'm good for my 80 billion, it might be, well, yeah, I'm going to build a huge data center and it's going to be part of this campus. I'll own this one. I'll own these GPUs. And so I'm chipping in, but it's mine and it just happens to be here. So it's localized and we're all working together on this. So there's some details here on the Abilene Clean Campus. It's 1,100 acres, 200 megawatts energized, and a gigawatt energized by 2025. There's a tax abatement in form of city and county pilot, zoned for light and heavy industrial, and they're building additional gigawatts already.
Yep.
And so the campus is in the model is known as the Lansicum Crusoe Abilene Clean Campus. Lancium. And has a stated capacity on their website of 1 gigawatt energized in 2025.
It's cool to see when you let private companies take on big projects like this, that you can do things pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Comparing this to the California Rail.
Insane. It's just night
project.
Yeah. It's insane. Yeah. The guy behind Crusoe is known for just being really, really good at finding power. And I think that's kind of what kicked off a lot of this, was just realizing that Abilene, Texas was the right mix of different resources and pipelines and grid infrastructure, that this was the place where you could actually get all the power, because that's what the big tech company has been hunting for. And they've been looking for, can we turn this nuclear reactor back on? Can we tap this natural gas line? Is there wind available or solar available? Can we just stack a bunch of batteries here? Like what can we do? And so in short, we estimate OpenAI is paying roughly $2.80 per GPU hour for the first GB200 cluster, which is a total cost of ownership of $2.38 an hour for the full-scale cluster. These figures scale with future NVIDIA GPU deployments. And then they break down some of the NVIDIA revenue estimates. And as we go forward to new GPUs, the number will double for each generation, and the power per GPU also grows. While 700,000 GPUs sounds small for 100 billion.
So this is why our joke, being like, it's all for you, brother. The post we made about Jensen and Masa.
Oh yeah,
it's like NVIDIA is the real winner here. You've said it before. They have more than 100% of all the profits in AI right now.
Yeah. Because everyone else is losing money, but not Jensen, baby. And so the project's financial backing, Oracle and SoftBank are the well-known equity providers. MGX is a more recently founded technology investment vehicle from Abu Dhabi. And the fund is chaired by the Sheikh, who is reported to oversee 1.5 trillion in investment funds. So the money really is available to some degree. If they want to pour it all in this, they can.
But MGX, as of now, is a $100 billion fund.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a question about what will the concentration be for that investment vehicle, but it could be very high since this is such a big story and it has such insane backing. In light of the recent Elon Musk claim that SoftBank could only raise under 10 billion, it is important to note that the JV will also raise debt capital for project financing. It's unclear what the mix of equity and debt financing will be. Oracle and MGX can fund a big chunk of the project with their massive balance sheets. OpenAI and SoftBank are allegedly down for 19 billion on paper each. SoftBank doesn't have this liquid today, but we think SoftBank will likely sell off a portion of its ARM stake to fund the equity check. And so I think SoftBank has over $100 billion.
Couldn't SoftBank also borrow against their ARM stake?
Yeah, certainly.
Moss is not afraid of levering
leverage. So OpenAI also doesn't have the capital, but they will be able to raise with O3's release, and they don't have to do it directly, fully, but can through some kind of hybrid instrument issued to everyone else in the consortium. Elon Musk is right.
That's the tough thing. That's the tough thing when you get into, like, it's not hard for Sam to raise $1 billion, and this is the same thing for founders. Very easy to raise $1 million. Raising 19 million. You're getting into territory that people start to ask. They want the spreadsheets start coming out a little bit.
The question is if project financing risk will be separated from the parent organizations. Separating this risk is important because OpenAI will need to raise capital to pay for this. Thankfully, OpenAI is not immediately required. OAI has enough existing capital to pay for rental payments on the cluster this year, but they need to be able to pay rental fees in 2026 and beyond, which scale massively. It is possible OpenAI cannot raise the money directly, but we are believers that their technology and products will scale to support this. The reality of the joint venture. Many big names were announced alongside the Stargate JV, ranging from NVIDIA, ARM, Microsoft, Oracle, and the previously mentioned financiers. The names are large and impressive, but the reality is there are distinct winners and losers here. Microsoft is the biggest loser. Microsoft is largely left on the sidelines as OpenAI utilizes another infrastructure partner. As such, Nadella stated, "All I know is I'm good for my 80 billion." Microsoft's recent blog post stated the facts of the partnership and how Microsoft has a ROFR, but the reality is that this is incrementally negative for Microsoft's long term because they were afraid to take on the risk of this investment.
Well, if they're afraid and the fear was correct, then it's not necessarily guaranteed to be negative.
No. Good point.
Yep.
And then ARM is thought to be a winner potentially because they rallied 16% of the news because they were named a technology partner because, of course, they're owned by SoftBank. So a lot of people were worried that ARM would sell off because what if SoftBank sells their whole position? But if they have a massive new contract to sell new chips,
Masa knows what he's doing.
But only because of the Grace and Vera CPUs that accompany Blackwell and Rubin GPUs, all from NVIDIA. So SoftBank is actually, like, they don't even make GPUs, but they make CPUs that need to go alongside every GPU for coordination of the actual server. So the server has a lot of different, and there's so many companies that we should get into in the server, in the data center deep dive. There are companies that just make Ethernet cables and they're just printing, or like they make the screws that go in the server racks, or like the air conditioning units, the water chillers. Like all of these things are like you can't even buy natural gas generators anymore because they're so in demand. And so those companies are going to be ripping. We should do a whole market map, like
totally
with that other company, the business of rebuilding, I guess. So SoftBank likely pushed for ARM to get on the PR, and the optics look nice. ARM isn't doing much. The reality for ARM shareholders, as stated above, is SoftBank will likely have to sell off a chunk of its stake in the company to fund Stargate. We think investors are largely missing this point and mistakenly view this announcement as materially, incrementally good news. Oracle is placed with a huge burden of tackling both data center management and managing supply chain logistics. It's quite a task to manage a 1.8 gigawatt cluster and procure all necessary equipment at the command of another company. NVIDIA is obviously involved as it's their hardware. OpenAI will maintain control of operations and run almost all of its own cluster management software. The future of the joint venture. This is the next step in an exuberant progression in the AI cycle, which he recently wrote about in Fabricated Knowledge. I got to follow up and read that. That sounds interesting. We know the first 100 billion will be spent in Abilene, and that there will be more campuses developed for the remaining 400 billion. Even more impressive, all these data center campuses will continue to be built out with the aim of distributed training, so training across multiple data centers.
Yep.
And so
there's some savvy real estate investors out there trying to figure out where the next data centers will be.
Oh yeah.
And buy up the surrounding land and properties and stuff like that, because all of a sudden new data center pops up. It's like, okay, well, all of the surrounding rental, like apartments, just probably 2x. Right?
Yeah, I mean, data centers aren't as dense in terms of human capital as a Facebook campus, but there's still tons of employees and tons of stuff going on, and like there's just a million different ways to make money when there's such a hive of activity. I mean, even like security guards are going to be in demand, like dump trucks and like
what are those, the white monsters?
Oh yeah.
Or the super cracked
the
engineers.
the ultra white monster.
Yeah.
Those will be in short supply. We're gonna need to keep all the supply lines flowing. But fascinating to see Stargate rolling out, and excited to go visit the plant in person. I want to go see it.
We need a shot of us on the ground, wind ripping, yelling into the microphone.
Yep.
We're here down at Stargate.
Stargate. Maybe they'll rename the town. They should rename it Stargate,
By
Texas.
town. Or
like Starbase, Stargate, rivalry. Oh, interesting. I wonder if the star name is like a little bit a shot across the bow.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Elon buys up out of all the out-of-home ads in Abilene.
On AdQuick?
On AdQuick.
He just rips
and just
billion into AdQuick
and just perpetually
trolls.
Trolls,
He would do that. He likes a troll.
He's not afraid to be. Although the more efficient thing to do is just comment with a crying emoji under every thing that Sam posts.
Well, that's our update on Project Stargate. Let's move on to, we got a DM, we got a correction to issue. On the last show, I said that bees don't eat honey, and I was wrong. They do eat honey. Coogan is totally wrong. If a beekeeper takes too much honey from the hive, they will starve/die. So I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake. Please forgive me.
Won't happen again. That's the kind of factoid you just don't forget.
I think I'm going to remember that forever.
Bees enjoy honey.
So our printer ran out of ink, so we don't have all of the posts printed. We're going to be working off a laptop. But our first banger today comes from Dhruva. He says, we can do this. We have the companies. We just need our own Shenzhen place, and we'll soon get the policy. And Kyle Chan is saying, Chinese tech companies are increasingly becoming tech Swiss Army knives, starting in one industry and then quickly branching out into a range of adjacent tech domains. Xiaomi, which was a phone company, is now building electric vehicles. DJI builds LiDAR, and they also build cameras and microphones and all sorts of production equipment. Li Auto builds robots. Baidu builds autonomous vehicles. And here's a piece that he has in High Capacity showing how all of the different Chinese companies operate in multiple sectors. And this is just something we haven't seen in America. Like, there was a time when Apple was going to build a car, and we've seen some crossover, but I think the FTC really screwed this up because, even just the Amazon thinking about building home robotics, they had to fight on the Roomba acquisition and all this stuff. And there's just been so much pressure.
Roomba, almost died.
Yeah. And if you're a big tech company and you're going into, we are Apple, we're going to build a car. And in order to do that, we're going to need to acquire some teams. Like, look at what Zuck did with the metaverse. He bought Oculus, and that one went through. But then he bought some fitness VR app. Did you hear about this? He bought a fitness VR game, basically. Clearly, probably just an acqui-hire for some great developers who never really got product market fit on their fitness app because it's such a small market. Tries to bring them in, and the FTC blocks it. And says that this will give them undue monopoly control over the VR fitness industry. It's like, what VR fitness industry? This isn't a real thing. Yeah. There's like $10 of revenue in this industry. Why are you shutting this down? Just let Zuck build a little bit of a team so we get something.
The man Zuck.
Let him Zuck. Let him Zuck. And so, ridiculous. I don't know if you have anything more on this, but
it ties back. I posted that we need our own Project Stargate for domestic drone manufacturing. We've let DJI own the commercial drone, consumer drone market in the U.S. They own a lot of the commercial drone market. They sell into police stations. There's a lot of individual SMBs and manufacturing facilities that could manufacture parts for drones, but the issue is there's not a clear demand from US-based companies. And so we need, if we want to be competitive on drones, which, other people have said are the next, it's like getting into, it's the next gun in terms of a player on the battlefield.
Yep.
We probably need to invest like $20 billion to set up the proper infrastructure, set up campuses that can produce, because in a near peer conflict, if drones actually are an important aspect, player in that, we will not be able to compete purely on an output basis. So even if we were to have a better product, say Anduril has a better product than DJI, it just purely on a mass volume basis will get smoked, right? Yep. So, and this goes back to Carry No Interest has talked about this before. He says that if you want to compete with China It's not about just encouraging manufacturing and making a better regulatory environment. It's massive government incentives and investment that the Chinese government has done, for decades now.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Let's go to Ben Hylack. He says, Deepseek R1 has an existential crisis. And I don't know if this is Photoshop, but he was clearly talking to it about Tiananmen Square and says, no, I mean, the Chinese government killed people there. And it just says, no, the Chinese government has never made mistakes. It has only been dedicated to its people, the people of China. It has never made any mistakes. It has never made any mistakes. It has never made any mistakes, And it just like completely freaks out. And I don't know if this is real, but it feels real.
You never know with Hylack.
No. He's a good Photoshop artist. He's a notorious screenshot.
He did the Jaguar rebrand.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hilarious. But yeah, I mean, I'll have to play around with it myself, see if I can jailbreak it, see if there's some fun stuff. I'm sure we'll get more in the coming days of people playing with DeepSeek. Let's go to Sula. Says, should I try the Trump diet? Let me know. Will you try this out? It's no breakfast. Well, we stay away from politics, but this is a health.
This is just health.
This is just health.
This is biohacking.
The Trump diet is no breakfast, small snacking around lunch, a feast for dinner, 12 Diet Cokes per day, no coffee, no alcohol, no exercise.
I think Trump is so active that he probably gets 10,000 steps a day without ever going for a walk.
Yeah.
He's just like walking between meetings.
Yeah.
Spends a lot of time on his feet. So the exercise thing is crazy. Yeah. But also a lot of these old dogs that have, Warren Buffett, et cetera, they don't seem to need to lift weights. Like they maintain mass.
Crazy.
They're size lords, right? When you're a size lord, you can keep the mass on without weight training. It's interesting because most people feel better if they have a bigger meal for lunch. Mm-hmm. But I find when I'm really busy, today we had breakfast. I had like half a breakfast burrito. Then I won't have eaten until I'm going to have a big, meal for dinner.
I mean, speaking of the mass monsters, the bodybuilders really do eat a lot of small meals throughout the day. And so there's something to that, like like sustained energy, like snacking all through the year, all through the day. So you're not seeing like big spikes at any point in time. And then the 12 Diet Cokes is kind of the same thing. Like you're not seeing spikes in caffeine. You're just caffeinated
steady
lightly,
state.
All steady state. There's something to it, but it is a little silly. Bennett Siegel says, seeing a lot of pitches on marketing agents as a low-cost, high-volume way to scale customer outreach. Before the Gen AI era, we just called that spam.
Yeah, it's hard to be. It's interesting because, I made a joke recently about how Trump making an executive order to ban the creation of new AI sales agent companies.
Very trendy.
And so it's a very, and I'm sure there's like 10 of these companies in the YC batch.
Yep.
People have joked before that oftentimes founders won't find product market fit, and then they'll pivot into building some sales enablement tool because what they've just experienced around selling, they have some type of experience there or pain points. But the explosion of these AI sales tools has made me more and more bullish on the historical sales leader who is taking their client out to a nice lunch, really getting to know them, bringing them across companies, right? So somebody might work at Databricks and be a top performer there and go to Oracle and bring a lot of those relationships over, right? And so the value of relationships seems to be accelerating. The value of a cold email is going to decline pretty dramatically. Because I'm surprised somebody hasn't made a passive cold email tool that just sort of sends cold emails every day to high value kind of like people. Yeah. Being like, hey, what's up? I'm an 18-year-old. And historically, to do a good cold email, you really had to put some effort into it. You don't want it to be too long, but you want to make sure that there's some thought put into it. But I'm sure some 18-year-old will build a tool that's like, we send 10 great cold emails a day on your behalf,
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I've ever fallen for an AI generated cold email. I don't even respond to any cold emails. I don't even respond to warm emails often. I have about 1,000 emails that I should probably go through. Even some close friends have trouble getting through to me sometimes, unless it's really important.
Yeah, I have 3,251 unread text right now, so I'd like to see an AI.
I'd like to see an AI try and break through on that. But at the same time, like, I do think that, it might be hard. It might be hard to like close me as a client. But you see this with like the AI slop on Instagram. Like, it clearly works on some people. And so the question is just like sales enablement for what product? Because there are people right now scrolling Instagram and being like, what? Like, a cow made out of cabbages or whatever. And they're just looking at the most like sloppy, like, oh, like a bed made out of bread. Like, so cool.
Well, the other thing with emails, you can send a terrible sales email, but if you send it 10,000 times, you're going to get one person. And then if it's very cheap to do that.
Yep.
Then it was worth doing, I guess.
Maybe,
it is spam.
Yeah. Maybe the spam alpha is like normally like direct email outreach is reserved for B2B customers where a single client closing is like usually well over $1,000 LTV. And direct response on Instagram ads is for stuff that's like around $100 LTV, right? Or below. And so maybe the AI sales agents kind of democratize that SDR experience for consumer products at the lower level. And so it's it's more like you went down the marketing funnel and now like you're just texting with someone like, oh, do you want to actually close the deal on that like t-shirt you were about to order?
It's interesting. The only email spam that if you go to your spam folder, you'll see is for him, the products that you can get on him. So boner pills, basically.
Yep. And it's been like that for decades. Like that was the major alpha of like internet.
And they
spam,
figured out
illegal.
You can send, if you send 100,000 emails and it's
point figure out when you
really cheap.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
As long as you can. Good.
I got a text message today from somebody. I don't know if it was real or spam, but they were claiming to be from TikTok. And I was like, you really didn't do your research. You think they're going to recruit me to join TikTok.
Yeah. There was a guy, what's his name? He was like a drug trafficker. People think he invented Bitcoin. Paul LaRue. This is a crazy story. We should do a whole deep dive on him. It's fascinating. But basically, he got his start online pushing boner pills and illegal supplements, right? And he would get he would get blocked at like the domain name level. And so then he started buying new domain names constantly and just immediately spinning up a new website and then sending more emails. And then he started getting blocked at the DNS level. And so he bought a registrar. And like he was the person that owned the registration, the ability to register new websites in like an entire country.
Yeah.
And then he went on and did a bunch of other stuff. And I think he was like smuggling crystal meth from North Korea at some point. It was like, it is a crazy story. I think he's in jail now. But a lot of people thought he was like Satoshi for a while because he wrote a bunch of not cryptocurrency software, but like cryptography software. It was like early, like
kind of like the powers for good.
Yeah. He was kind of like a Silk Road guy. Yeah. Kind of proto Silk Road. Let's go to Avi Schiffman on the bucket pull. Let's see what he's got to say. This sounds familiar. Let's see what he's got to say. He says shower products are the biggest scam and only for disgusting pigs that roll around in the mud all day. I stopped using shampoo and skincare stuff a year ago, and my hair and skin is the cleanest and healthiest it's ever been. Water and an office job is all you need.
It's got water and an
office job.
Yeah.
I think you had that take like a week before you busted.
It's funny. I when I was in college still, as many college students do, would randomly suffer from acne. So I was like, I'm gonna try to like get some face wash and all this stuff.
Sure.
And I ramped it up, and I was using like face wash and like a moisturizer.
And at one point, Bateman.
and I would look around at like my friends, and I was like, I know you don't do anything but splash water on your face. And your skin looks better than mine.
Yep.
So I just quit it completely and my skin got better.
Yep.
And it really comes down to diet. People often, I think men do skincare and things like that, reactionary. Either their girlfriend or significant other goes, hey, you should try this. Or they're having a skin issue. So they're like, I want to solve this. But usually it's a dietary thing that's catalyzing it. And so you can just keep putting water on your face and just eat better food. And you'll probably be okay.
Are you familiar with the Taylor Lorenz skin care regimen?
No, but I should be.
It's Hydrogen peroxide wipes like 1,000 times a day. I heard it and I was like, I've never heard anyone doing that.
It's because the temperature's set to 88 degrees.
Maybe that's it. But I was like, I don't know anything about skincare, but that one sounds weird. That sounds wrong. Who knows? Maybe it works. I don't know. Give it a try. Let us know how it works for you if you give that a try. Bill Gurley says, as a third-party curious observer...
All right, serious.
As a third-party curious observer, I have several naive, unanswered questions about the Stargate project. Obviously understand that they have no obligation to disclose. Here's a list with responses wide open. I would love to be able to aggregate the best answers at some point. 1, corporate structure. The OpenAI press release says that Stargate is a new company. Is Stargate established as a standard C Corp, LLC, a joint venture, or something else entirely? And even a joint venture is not that's not a structure. Like, it can be a joint venture that's a C Corp or a joint venture that's an LLC, right?
Yeah.
I think when you set up joint venture, you just say, we're starting a new C Corp and the shareholders are the joint venture partners, right? So he has a bunch of these. CEO leadership. Will Stargate have an independent CEO? Customer exclusivity. Is OpenAI the sole customer?
Didn't they say in the announcement that it would have a new CEO, a new board?
I think like so. That? Will they be as operationally intense as the XAI team that launched Memphis? Operating partner role. Release says OpenAI is the operating partner. What does that mean in practical terms?
I think one thing that meant that they cleared up in the Dylan Patel piece is that they're using their software to manage the clusters.
Yes.
So it's more like a SaaS management component than
I like this. Is OpenAI the sole customer, or will Stargate yearn to serve other businesses? Is that
many people yearn?
You gotta yearn. Oracle's day-to-day involvement. What specific role are they playing? Did Oracle previously own the assets there? Comparison to CoreWeave. What kind of business is Stargate? Is it effectively a direct competitor to CoreWeave's AI hosting approach, or is it structured and positioned differently? Debt usage. We talked about this. CoreWeave is rumored to go as high as 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 leverage. What level of risk will the entity consume? Appeal to third-party investors, standalone and potential round tripping, and pre-training versus inference and data center structure. So he asks a bunch of questions, and I think that we'll have to do a follow-up to see what kind of. Hopefully, he does a post or he talks about it on BG Squared. But it'd be great to see where those come around. I think that some of those
one thing
but there are
they
a lot
don't.
of
There's it's a private company.
Yep.
Absolutely no obligation for them to share.
Yeah, leave them alone, actually. Why are you asking so many questions, Bill?
No, everybody's been asking questions because it's such a big headline number that you're inviting a lot of that. But I think people will start to find out. So if Oracle's public company, they'll have to report on their ownership and investment. OpenAI has enough shareholders at this point that they'll have
stuff
to
will come out.
It'll come out. SoftBank is a public company, so they'll have to. So it'll all kind of start. You'll be able to paint a more clear picture over time.
But again, they're raising pre-incorporation. This is what happens.
Yeah.
Raise half a trillion pre-incorporation.
Yeah,
there's plenty of examples. The Google check. It was half of something. It was I think $500,000 or something. The guy wrote the check, and they were like, "Whoa, where do we put this? We can't cash this." Didn't matter. Worked out. Going to happen again. Let's go.
Let's go.
Up only. Bull market.
Bubble behavior.
Bull market everywhere. Bull market somewhere. Arbitral at Electric Capital says President Trump just issued a major executive order that touches on everything crypto. This is a big deal. Stablecoins, Operation Choke Point, developer protections, a new crypto task force, and a digital asset strategic reserve. Here's a breakdown. Protecting economic liberty, Americans are guaranteed the right to use open blockchains without fear of persecution, self-custody digital assets, promote the dollar through stablecoins, banking access for all, no more Choke Point 2.0, drive to get regulatory clarity for innovation. CBDCs are off the table, so no central bank digital currencies. They're going to create a new digital asset task force with stable coin oversight, risk management, and digital finance. A national crypto reserve, he says. A rollback of the Biden policies. Trump revokes EO 14067, explicitly rejecting central bank digital currencies and rolling back policies viewed as overly restrictive or government heavy in their approach to digital finance. Can you look up what Bitcoin did after this went out? I think it's down recently.
It's all priced in.
Day. I guess it was priced in. I mean, really, people were expecting Trump to do amazing things with crypto. And so, like, you know, how can he meet those
Well, it's funny
because
right? What would a Bitcoin have done if Trump coin hadn't sucked all the extra liquidity, right? People were selling Bitcoin to buy.
Yeah, I mean, certainly some of the alts like Dogecoin traded down because people were rotating. I mean, Bitcoin's so big at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost $1 trillion, I think, maybe more. And so,
but
it's hard.
The average,
but still, that's 5%. Yeah, I mean, it's
Trump 5%. Coin is attracting more money from people that are not in the trenches, right? They just have a little bit of money in Coinbase or whatever, and they want to rotate.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't been following the crypto news too much. I'm still just focused on those three that we always talk about: the stable coins, betting markets, and Bitcoin, basically store of value. But I don't know. Hopefully, we get more interesting stuff out of this. We haven't even entered the phase of the cycle where people are talking about like new use cases. Really, it's all just like meme.
Yeah, that's actually what I'm excited about. Is okay if Trump made kind of doing whatever you want legal by nature of doing what he did, then a lot of I wouldn't be surprised if somebody starts to try to use tokens to represent stocks and actually bringing real world assets on chain, which historically was just expensive because of securities laws. But that's been a big
Also, just like when the markets are up like this, there's so much more capital flowing around for like, if somebody wants to really give, crypto gaming another run, like they'll have another shot on gold.
Yeah, there was so many.
Maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it'll never work. But like, at least we'll get another shot on it.
I was doing some research for Banger Archive last night, and I saw somebody posting the obvious end state is the intersection of crypto and gaming. Yep. Because everybody's sort of in game earning tokens with their time, but they're not actually tokens. They're just points in the game. And you can kind of like sell your account or you can sell gear, and it's sort of like it is a market, but it's not actually financially engineered. And so I wonder what you don't hear about any games that were created during the 2021 boom. Like if you remember, Bored Ape Yacht Club was supposed to be developing an MMO. Maybe they still are. You haven't seen much about it.
Went out. There were like Decentraland and like the metaverses that were supposed to be like kind of Roblox, do whatever you want. There was one game that did feel like it had some modicum of product market fit called Dark Forest.
Oh yeah.
That got like a little bit popular, and it seemed like people actually liked.
And
it was kind of cool
the
map was all cryptographically sealed, so it was like open source, and you could kind of verify that the other person wasn't cheating. And there were some interesting things to it.
There's a game coming out
that financialized.
Game coming out I'm excited about. So Josh Harris, who was one of my first hires at Party Round, he was 19 at the time, like college dropout, killed it at Party Round. After he went to was like an EIR, I think, at Paradigm, and now he's building a crypto chess game that I think will be pretty cool, like being able to play chess with like real money on the line, have like special characters, almost like a Dungeons and Dragons chess. So that'll be launching this year, which I'm sure will be very.
There was always just this big problem with like the crypto stuff like sounded good, but there was very little reason for a game company like Valve or Electronic Arts to say like, yeah, sure, you can take your assets out of our beautiful ecosystem that we tax 30% on everything and we own 100% of the liquidity you have. Like there was no financial incentive for those companies to ever be like, this is actually
and the big one,
so you
like
had to start
the next
from scratch.
The next GTA, if they had.
Okay, so then I need to raise $1 billion and hire all the best artists and developers to actually make the next GTA.
I think that was the big issue with crypto games. Yeah, is like you are not going to create a new game studio. Yes, you can use if you have a pretty good game, you can use the token to incentivize people to actually play it. But then it becomes just an economy where you have people in the Philippines. There was that game, I forget
Axie Infinity.
Axie Infinity, that people were like, this is the new economy. And then it just was a Ponzi.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a little bit on a Twitch stream just to understand like, okay, what does this game actually look like? And it just like, it wasn't as entertaining as like even League of Legends or like, Hearthstone or any game that it was like competing with. And that's just because
but now you might have these big game, Activision, Riot, all these players being like, okay, crypto's a real thing. Let's implement it.
Yeah, there's just still such a countervailing economic force to saying, let's not do that and capture.
We have the best game, and
we have GTA. Oh, you want to buy GTA coins?
And the whole thing is like, I actually don't think that you should. I think if you're the best in the world, if you're the top 200 player at a video game, you should be able to make like a decent living off of it.
Yeah,
I don't think that video games should be financialized to the degree where just playing it, like the top 100,000 players should be. It's just we shouldn't encourage that as like a career path.
Yeah, a lot of this just winds up being some sort of like regulatory arbitrage, like wealth transfer, and I guess like the good ending would be like, hey, because of restrictions on investing in companies, you have to be an accredited investor, and so you can't raise money in mass. You can do like some sort of Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign for your game, but then you need to go to the venture capitalists, and maybe there's some sort of capital formation thing where if the game gets traction, like buying the coin is essentially like investing, like the Trump coin. Like it's just like getting more capital into this thing, but then you have to count on the developer actually like making something. It's all very, very fraught. Anyway, let's move on to we'll do Base Baron and then we'll do a promoted post. Base Baron says E-Whack, or the mimetic death and rebirth of tech. If there was ever
called it E-Whack.
E-Whack. If there was ever a movement destined to fizzle out like a damp matchstick, it was EAC. At least the EAs had the self-respect to make their leaders serve hard time. That's BF, I think. Here we see a movement ostensibly about the relentless push towards a techno-capital singularity, instead mired in the quicksand of its own internal contradictions and the inherent flaws of its messiahs. First, consider the misalignment between the movement's professed ideals and the actual behavior of its leading lights. EAC, in its essence, was meant to be a clarion call for the acceleration of technology, a rallying cry for those who see the universe's entropic dance as a mandate for human ingenuity to multiply complexity and intelligence. Instead, what we observe is a parade of digital anons ensconced in their online echo chambers, chanting accelerate like a mantra detached from any real world action. These are not the builders or the shapers, they are the spectators, mistaking their fervor for progress. And he goes on to write about, wow, he really wrote a lot about this. He really cared. And he got 10 likes for it, so congrats.
Wow. No, I think but there's a real sort of very real message here where when you have a movement like
it's very hard to go from doxed to not doxed. Like, if we knew who Satoshi was, would that be good for the price of Bitcoin? Almost certainly no.
Yeah.
Right? Not even the selling pressure, just every human is flawed. And I find this like there's so many different like health influencers. Oh, you got to live this way, and then there's a family influencer. You got to have a family, and like work influencer who says, oh, you got to work really hard. And then when you dig into those people, you can always find like, oh, this person who's saying you got to work really hard, like they have never had a family, or like they're completely out of shape. And you're like, wait, like no one.
But there's an issue where people commenting under every post accelerate. Yeah, it's cool,
silly.
But I think what the Baron's saying is he just wants to see those people actually creating progress in the real world, and not being part of a movement doesn't mean you're having any type of real tangible impact, right? The way to have a real impact is to participate in the underlying activity that is driving towards the goal of the movement.
Totally. Yeah, it's tricky.
Love to see Baron branching out into more thoughtful.
And I still think EAC was best when it was just a joke at the expense of EAs. And I thought that when it came up, I was like, I never put it in my bio. I never joined these like silly movements. I didn't do the .e thing. I owned it, but I didn't put it in my handle. I didn't do the NFT profile picture. I have trouble like joining like these big like movements because I feel like they're always very risky. You're on the top. It could backfire. But with I was like, super aligned, but I thought it was just so funny to just be like, oh, we're poking these like super serious EAs who are like, oh, we need to like put everything in a spreadsheet. And I was like, these people kind of need to be made fun of, and that's when EAC is at its best. And And then when it became this super serious, like actually acceleration is like the only way, it was like, okay, this is not fun anymore. Yeah. For me, at least. That was my experience with it.
Ruined it.
It ruined it.
Give me we got a promoted post. On a more light-hearted note, but also serious at the same time, we have a 19... John's... You're interrupting the post, John.
Let's go.
Relax. The 1966 Aston Martin DB6 shooting brake by FLM Panelcraft is a rare and striking example of bespoke British craftsmanship with only 3 produced and 1 in left-hand drive. And I just have a thing for shooting brakes. The first car that I ever, had access to was a Toyota Corolla that was triple my age at the time. Very paint chipping, hundreds, probably 150,000 miles on it. Ever since then, I've loved shooting brakes. I was lucky to own a Ferrari FF for a while. Great car. Thought it would be a good family car, but the Ferrari reliability was somewhat of an issue. But this thing is just amazing. I mean, imagine driving across the country in that, putting some real miles on it. Somebody in our audience should do that. So great example here.
Great pickup. Yeah. Let's go to Chairman Burb Bernanke. Love the name. I'm plotting on your rise, bro. I'm literally up in the lab scheming on beautiful abundance for you. I'm cooking up ways for a rising tide to lift all of our boats. I'm praying for your gains. I'm lighting a candle to your inevitable splendor, dude. Just love this. He's plotting on your rise.
I love this format.
It's great.
It's great ripping around.
Don't plot on people's downfalls. Plot on their rise.
I don't think enough group chats. A lot of group chats have this sort of unserious, people dropping memes and talking a little smack, stuff like that. I want to see group chats that are oriented around winning together.
I'm in one. It's called Iron Sharpens Iron.
Iron sharpens iron.
Everyone takes it very seriously.
Yeah, but the issue is people at the top are hyper competitive.
Yeah,
so
there's a little bit of that.
You got to cut it down.
In general, this one's the most positive I've ever been.
5 people oriented around winning together.
Yep.
Helping the brothers succeed at all costs. That's what we're trying to do.
That's what we're trying to
with
build
this
with
podcast.
Yeah.
That's why we run ads. You scratch our back.
Yeah. You leave us a 5-star review. You throw an ad in there. We'll read it on the show.
There you go.
Let's go to Catherine Boyle. She says, America is in deal mode and deal mode is infectious. If you have a deal you want to do, now's a good time to get it done. Also, it's time to get married. Dive in. It's the golden age of America.
She just added that?
Yeah, I like that little follow-up. Like, by the way.
If you have a post that does well.
This post sponsored by marriage.
Pronatalism.
Yeah, pronatalism.
The deal energy is real. It's never, it's rarely time. It's really a bad time to do a deal, right? Yeah. You want to be greedy when others are fearful, right? So people are pretty optimistic right now for a lot of good reasons. But yeah, go do some deals. It's a good call to action, right?
It's great. Yeah.
Simply
do deals. Deal. Yeah. Deals with deal mode. Let's go to Ben Hylack. He says ChatGPT can now use Claude. And so
Ben immediately, of course, he's immediately hacking it.
5K likes. Good post. Yeah. So he went to Operator, create a new chat to create a new B2B dashboard, and try using the app and tell me what you think. And so he's having Operator open Claude, log him in, and then use Claude to code for him. And it's all just very silly. But I don't know. I mean, it's probably a good stress test of the system if you can use that.
It is interesting. So yeah. Great marketing for Ben because he has a analytics platform, I believe, for AI products. But it's interesting how we're seeing already that somebody, I forget who posted this, that AI is eating UI, right? Yeah. Which eventually you will be able to use a model to use another model. Yep. So your preferred model, if you want to do something with another model, you'll just say, hey, go find the best model to do this task or like create this type of content and it'll just do it. And so you may never interact with the end UI. You'll just interact with your preferred model. Yeah. And that is why for all the hate and shade that people throw at OpenAI, it's overvalued. It's still being AI for the average consumer has massive
You're a
value.
navigator and you're the front end. Yeah, and it was last year or the year before, OpenAI launched GPTs, where you could go in and create a custom GPT, and you could upload specific documents, give it fine tuning instructions, and there was like an app store marketplace, and every once in a while I made one where I uploaded like a bunch of books and a bunch of information, PDFs about a specific topic, and then I could query that. And there were a couple others, like one that would help you write threads on X, and I think the idea there was that you let people build a ton of different GPTs, and then the one master GPT can route to one. And people were joking that there was one that was like Laundry Buddy that would just help you find like a laundromat. But in theory, it's like, yeah, like maybe someone's made a GPT that does one thing much better, and then when you query the like the master GPT chat, it can say, oh, okay, I'm going down. And this already happens with a mixture of experts and the reasoning models, but we can say, oh, okay, there's a coding model that's really good, and I need to write some code, so let me go over there and use that. Or there's a booking integration, and so all of that's happening kind of under the hood. It's funny in this frame, but it's very, very real. So let's move on to Lulu. She says, we should start with the brother of the year. So Bank of America posted an image that says, Bank of America serves more than 70 million clients, and we welcome conservatives. We would never close accounts for political reasons and don't have a political litmus test. And it's really that, like, my shirt that says I'm innocent of killing people is raising more questions than it's answering.
Yeah.
Like that type of thing.
Yeah.
And then there was instantly a community note saying Bank of America has been placed on notice by 15 state attorneys general for debanking conservatives. And Lulu is breaking down exactly what went wrong here. One, if you turn off replies, you look guilty.
Yep.
You can't turn off quote tweets, so you're just setting yourself up to get ratioed even harder by other means. You should have anticipated the community note, which looks worse than either comments or quote tweets. And if you're in the position of having to make a statement like this, comms and social media aren't your biggest problems. Rough. Yeah, I don't even know why they had to make this.
Prince,
was saying
a quote tweet is
debanked by you guys. Like, what?
And his family and his ex-wife and his ex-wife's husband.
Whoa!
Because they were receiving
payments.
Whatever.
Alimony.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, rough. Not a good day.
And the whole thing is there were fintech companies emerging over the last 6 years, probably 4 years, I guess, 5 years, that were explicitly because conservatives were being debanked.
Yep.
And they were saying this is the right wing, which we shouldn't have political leaning.
Yeah, it's very silly.
Our financial institutions should not be politically leaning at all.
Yeah.
Let's just keep politics out of. We keep politics out of the show. Let's keep them out of our banking system.
I agree. This is a fun one. I know you're gonna have a lot to say about this. Jared Friedman says Rocketable is building the first one-person $1 billion company. The plan is simple: buy up software companies, fire all the employees, and replace them with AI agents. Literally the most AGI-pilled idea I have ever heard.
Okay, so like many topics, like many podcasters often have a lot to say.
Yep.
I'll preface this by saying I don't work directly in private equity.
Yep.
And I'm not a software engineer, the other thing I would say is I like this sort of big, bold idea. It's cool to have this, major milestone, one person, $1 billion company.
Yeah.
Very exciting. And I think that many sort of, this is a cool experiment, and is worth funding from YC and is worth the founder trying to take a crack at it.
Sure.
But I have to imagine, like, here's the thing, like, buying companies trade on a market.
Yep.
And it's not perfectly efficient.
Sure.
But any company worth buying, unless the owner does not have, doesn't want to get the best possible price, is going to talk to a lot of people, right? Yep. So if you're this one person company, and to get one deal done, maybe you have to talk to like 200 companies, right? And all those 200 companies are talking to other private equity firms, other individuals. They're exploring raising other forms of capital. They have all these different options.
Yep.
I don't know that the classic private equity strategy has been to come in, fire all the unnecessary people, replace them with modern software, And so to me, I'm not quite sure that this, while I'm in favor of the experiment, I'm not quite, I would find it hard pressed to invest in the founder unless it was like a personal relationship, because I don't know that you're going to have any edge over the many other private equity firms that will all presumably follow the same strategy, right?
Yeah.
There's classic examples of software PE guys coming in, and there's 100 employees at the company, firing 90 of them, right?
Yeah.
And so firing all of them, I don't know how much
it's a weird,
better. I don't know if you're going to
positioning in brand. Right?
Yeah, and it's tough as a buyer.
So it'll go viral.
Historically, it's very good way to get attention, but what happens if this post goes viral? A bunch of talented people say, "Hey, I want to work on this. Sounds fun," and you're like, "Well, sorry, we want to be a $1 billion company. We'll hire you as a contractor or something like that. Just can't have you on the W-2." And so why? And so setting these artificial constraints is cool as an experiment to say, let's see what's possible, what's going to come out of this, and maybe it will force us to develop agentic software that ends up being better. But I thought it was interesting. The Gumroad founder now has something called anti-work, where you can come just build software to replace humans at Gumroad.
Oh, okay.
I think anti-work is owned by Gumroad.
Sure.
And so there's other experiments that are going at this, but the main thing is this guy isn't just competing.
Yeah.
He's competing with every private equity firm that buys software companies.
Totally.
And they don't care that you just have one person on your team. If they have a deal that they want to win, they'll staff it with 5 people.
Yep.
They'll tell the founder, hey, we're going to let go of a lot of people because we want to increase earnings, but we're not going to let go of your, we're not going to let go of you or whatever, whatever. And so it really comes down to paying a good price, winning the deal, knowing that the deal is going to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't see business owners being too thrilled about the thesis, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to fire my whole team.
It's like, no, more like even if you sell the private equity, if you've built up a business, you're like, well, yeah, like you're probably going to trim some people here and there, wind down some relationships over time. Sure, the company might be smaller in a few years, but the idea of just like, oh, day one, the goal is just like 0 employees, like screw everyone. It's like even more ruthless. And like, I mean, when you go to the website of a private equity company, they don't put front and center, because sometimes they don't. Like sometimes they actually grow the staff because that's what's best for the business. And they're really like, they're in some ways more ruthless or maybe less ruthless, but they're really just saying like, we actually just care about shareholder value. And so that might mean more jobs. That might mean pay raises. That might mean pay cuts. It's like, it's very dependent on what is. And
maybe what this turns into is one person being the CEO, because you still need a chief executive
probably
officer, presumably for some amount of time. Anyways, I'm excited to see it play out. We'll cover it on the show. I want them to be successful. And let's see what happens.
Yep. Let's go through some other stuff. Bill Halligan says the CEOs of the fastest growing startups are doing the following: 100% in the office. 2, very, very lean headcount. 3, mostly homegrown exec teams. 4, shooting for $1 trillion. Unicorns are dead. And 5, 80-hour work weeks. You love it? You put it in there because you're excited?
Yeah.
Shooting for $1 trillion? We've heard about this. A couple of companies have been talking about $1 trillion. I mean, like, there's more $1 trillion firms than ever now. So
you're only a few 10x's away from being a $1 trillion company.
That's true.
So I think this is accurate.
I mean, also, like, it's just hard to underwrite.
And this is the dynamic right now.
Outcome.
Yeah, this is the dynamic. So if everybody has access to these AI tools that make everybody more efficient, it actually just means that you should work even more to just increase the returns on that leverage.
Totally.
But
if you're saying 100% in office, don't let me catch you on a Zoom podcast, Brian, because I want to see you doing it in person.
That's right.
Ray says cursor is down. I'm writing organic farm raised non-GMO code by hand the way our ancestors used to do. 2K likes. A lot of people using cursor. They're excited. I saw people got cursor working with Deepseek under the hood.
Really? Bad.
That's the most inorganic, the most non-farm raised code you could possibly have.
Coding with some of these AI tools like Devin and Cursor is like retired people in Vegas on the slot machines who are just like
Yep.
you know,
Hit tab.
Um,
But you got to get the code written one way or another. Let's do another promoted post, and we'll close it out with a bucket poll.
Promoted post from our friend Sean Frank. Not his first time on the podcast, certainly not his last. He goes, that's a lot of meta spend. He was sent a plaque from Ridge for being in the $100 million club on Ridge. That means they have spent $100 million with the greatest financial institution
through their ramp cards.
Through their they have they have payments product too, so not necessarily all through their cards, although it went through possible. But yeah, and just goes to show. I mean, the Ridge is a perfect example of a ramp customer, very large, lots of net income, and run extremely efficiently.
And I love that it's a deal toy. We need to bring back deal toys.
We've been trying to bring back deal toys.
Yep.
We're working on some of our own.
Yep.
So if you're a company or a firm,
and it's
put it on your list.
It's going to go on the desk. Toy. It's going to be a constant reminder of like, yeah, Ramp cares about me as a business counterparty, which is great.
I think this is in the back of a truck bed too.
Oh, really?
Which is cool.
That's cool.
Very cool.
Cool. Well, let's close out with this bucket poll from Blue W Mist. Blue says, you are getting lapped by people 50% dumber than you because they don't overthink stuff. Aim, fire, correct later. I love it. Some good
ties into your strategy recently. Golden retriever
maxing. Yeah. Gotta just be friendly, hot, and dumb.
Yeah.
Intelligence is going to be too cheap to meter.
But high energy.
High energy. Just do stuff. Just get out there.
Just bark.
Make plays. Bark.
Let your dogs bark.
Grab that Frisbee out of the air. Grab that capital. That $500 billion, go get it.
$500 billion. Go for $1 trillion.
Woof, woof.
Bark, bark.
Let's go.
We'll see you
watching,
on
everyone.
Monday.
Please go and leave us a 5-star review and leave an ad for your company or a friend's company in the review comments. We love these 5-star reviews. We'll print it out. We'll read it on the show. It's a free ad read.
Also big, Monday. As of now, we're planning to do our first ever live show.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be happening from around, call it 11 to 2 p.m. Pacific.
Sounds great.
You're not going to want to miss it. We're very excited to go live, and have a good weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.